All right, well, good morning. It's 9:30, so we'll call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with just sharing with everyone that we are streaming live, and that we welcome those who are here with us in the room, and as also we welcome those online. So let's begin with a call of the roll to see.
Trent Smith. Felicia Williams-Bradley.
Here.
Estella Hernandez. Here. Bill Flanagan.
Here.
Brian Kovac. Jennifer Mendes.
Here.
Superintendent Comments.
All right, and I know Mr. Kovac is here. We do have a quorum. These mics are new, so we're going to push them back. All right, did we comply with the open meeting? Okay, very good. And also, Mr. Bowden. All right, well, board members, would you please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, a salute to the Oklahoma flag, followed by a moment of silence. Oh, I forget. Normally we have that on the screen. So. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of Oklahoma, its symbols of peace unite all people. All right, thank you. Please be seated. Well, this really feels like a return to normalcy, I have to say, and it is one that we really welcome. For those who are following Facebook and can't see what all is in the room, we have a live guest, and that feels like things are getting back to normal, and we appreciate all of those here today, as well as all of you who are following at home as well. So let me begin with a few superintendent remarks, if you will. We have quite a lot that has happened since we last met. But before I do, I want to recognize Chairman McBride, who is our Appropriation Education Sub-Chair, and we really do want to thank you for all your hard work, advocating for Oklahoma kids and all of those who serve in schools. We appreciate you being here, and I hope I haven't missed. Yes, I did. Yes, and also Representative Lowe. Thank you so much for being with us as a member of that committee as well, and your leadership. Thank you very much. Hope I haven't lost you with anyone else. All right, and so now let's begin. We always want to honor the people that are doing the hard work to serve within the agency, and this is a way also to acquaint you a little bit with some of the services that are happening. So today we want to take a moment to acknowledge Frances Clevenger. Frances is with us today. Are you there? And her team. And in fact, go ahead and go to the podium if you don't mind, and we'll talk about you for a minute. So Frances is the Assistant Executive Director of Human Resources, and Susan is here, the Executive Director as well, and we are grateful for both of your leadership. Frances began working at the State Department of Ed in 2001 in the Office of School Improvement. So she has seen a lot as she has worked in many different areas. Then she also spent time in curriculum and instruction, data services, and communications. So what better fit to move into human resources in 2010? And in July of last year, she was promoted to Assistant Executive Director, and we've done well. Thank you. Her nominator said, Frances always goes above and beyond to help our HR team. There isn't a day that goes by that she doesn't ask if there's anything she can do to help any one of us. Frances is always happy to help with anything that needs to be done. She is definitely an asset to this agency. And you have seen under your tenure here, the growth of those supporting the agency as we have won numerous grants and have been able to add to those we serve with important people, and you've been a part of that. So I really thank you. So I would love to give you a certificate, and actually I didn't think about this very well. And we'll take a picture. You want to get up in this picture? All right, come on in the front here. I'll get
I'll get over it.
Okay. That sounds good. All right, here we go. All right. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, here's that. Thank you again. Thank you.
You bet.
Right. All right, well, let me just also share, we've been really, really busy with thousands of Oklahoma educators and leaders this week. Maybe you've participated in one of these sessions, but the State Department just wrapped up the annual summer conference of professional development this week. It was virtual, as we did in the last year due to the pandemic. We continued that. It takes about a year to plan. And at that time, we didn't know what was coming. So we knew, though, that training and support needed to go on. So I want to mention that we had this time a real scaled back level of sessions, only 30, but they included assessing and addressing unfinished student learning, understanding school threats, and differentiating instruction in a post-pandemic classroom. So more than 3,300 people registered for the conference, and normally we would take this out on the road, and we certainly plan to be able to do that next summer. We invite you to come along and see some of these amazing campuses and great people in communities all over the state. And we plan to begin that planning and work just in a couple of months. In fact, I think Justin Newton is around here, and he is the one that kicks that off. So I'm probably causing a little panic right now talking about it as we just finished this. I also want to kind of take a moment to just update you on something that's happened this week. 3 members of the department presented at the National Conference for Student Assessment. NCSA is an opportunity to showcase the good work that states are doing, so really that others across the country are able to learn best practices, challenges, and implementations. And also, it's a time for us to get further suggestions for success. So Maria Kanak, who is the Deputy Superintendent of Assessment and Accountability, was asked to present along with national researchers and experts in assessment on meaningful interpretation of data. Let me start over. Her presentation was meaningful interpretation of data relies on high quality data validation practices and showcased the collaborative benefits of tele-edge. For those of you who are familiar with the ECHO lines that we have through OSU, tele-edge is a project with the Oklahoma State University that offers ongoing virtual professional development for all of our Oklahoma educators. And also included in the presentation was our Executive Director of Data Quality and Research, Dr. Michael Tamborski. He presented on innovative validation systems and processes developed by the department to ensure that the visualizations can be trusted. So to put that all into just a real quick phrase, it's really about having high quality data that we can have confidence in, and that we can visualize what the data means so that we can take action to improve or to share best practices across the state with other districts. Finally, Christy McCreary was also part of the presentation and asked to make a presentation as the Executive Director of Assessment. And she presented on the needs for accommodations and accessibility tools that maximize students' abilities to demonstrate their knowledge and skills on the large-scale assessment that we're required to give under federal and state law. So we're really, really proud that these 3 were showcased on a national level and highlighting some of the important work they have championed. All right, now, let me also mention that you may have seen the news release that we put out where our team, our legal team, and also our team in child nutrition recently uncovered more than 1.6 million in fraud at feeding sites. And the majority of these improper claims were reported at child care sites. No school district was included in this we're discussing today. And it is really about fraudulent activity, and it was discovered through a number of accountability measures that have been implemented in the past few years, 6 at the most. These measures include validation for high-risk claims, site approvals, training prior to approval to feed as a feeding site, and frequent reviews of high-risk claims. Participation in the summer feeding service program soared by over 700% during the pandemic. And that's a good thing. We had a lot of need, and a lot of people stepped up to be able to provide that support. Program sites served over 13 million meals to children between the month of May and August 2020, surpassing the 1.6 million meals for the same period in 2019. Just see the need and what I would argue doesn't really go down to that lower level of 1.6 million that are normally able to be served, just because the pandemic is over. And this is a need that we want to be able to continue to provide support for as we have the ability under federal regulation. We just need to have good partners and get that food to our kids. So while we are grateful for them, we also want to keep that oversight as tight and strong as possible. Okay, so some of the work that you do as you pass standards for science, cut scores even for how we measure success have been showcased. And we have a new report from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP. Often that is referred to as the nation's report card. And Oklahoma was named as one, actually showcasing us as making significant strides in setting those high expectations for our students. And that we actually are second in the nation in our expectations for early level reading. There used to be a report that we looked at when we started this process of remedying something, and it was called the honesty gap. And that was where you made a claim in a district, or in a state actually, that proficient meant you're ready for the next steps in learning and you're ready to go to post-secondary pursuits without need for remediation. And our readiness claim didn't match when we saw the national participation in these snapshots nationally with NAEP, or with the ACT, or with the SAT. And so what we did was to make a very concerted effort to realign that so that we could address those needs, not in high school, but all the way back at kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. And so it's pretty significant that we would be ranked second in the nation. We have closed that gap, and that you are a part of, and I am very grateful for. All right, so just to give you a little bit of history of the progression over the last couple of years. In 2017, Oklahoma ranked 15th in 4th grade reading and 14th in 8th grade reading. And remember, we're not talking about the outcome yet, because that's something that's going to come over time. But where we are seeing clearly readiness so that we can get ready all along the way. Our expectations were very high, and earlier when we started this extraordinary process over the last 4 years, we rose from 41st to 2nd in the country. And that's significant, and that's worth celebrating. But it also calls for support in the classrooms to achieve what we know our kids can do if they have the wraparound services and support and people and those skilled professionals that they need. So next month, we will begin offering at no cost to bring some support that we're talking about. Professional development in early childhood literacy to 10,000 teachers in Oklahoma over the next 3 years. All teachers who work with K through 3rd grade students on reading, spelling, and related language skills are eligible for this program. It will be free, and we are paying for that with some of our federal set-aside funds. Oklahoma Science of Reading Professional Development is funded again by the ESSER funds that are part of that COVID relief funds that we have for the next several years. And it is part of our initiative under Ready Together Oklahoma. Okay. I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking here, but there's still more to tell you. So let me mention another ranking that just came out yesterday. We received some exciting news from Fordham Institute. According to their State of the State Standards of Civics and U.S. History report, Oklahoma ranks 7th in the nation for quality civics and U.S. history academic standards. So we made it top 10 there, and we were awarded a B+ in both areas with recognition for deep content, clear organization, and a commitment to telling the story of Native Americans. And we are really proud of that. And you'll receive a report today from our those leaders who work in the support of Native American education. And so keep that in mind. Only 5 states and the District of Columbia scored higher than Oklahoma. So we have work to do, and we will get there. We won't be satisfied till we are the gold standard across the nation. So the Oklahoma Academic Standards for Social Studies were updated by this board in 2019 with a focus on history, geography, civics, and economics, as well as also just reflecting back tribal sovereignty and the Tulsa Race Massacre. So they emphasized all of the engagement in the democratic process and solving real world problems, as well as elevating factual information into the standards. So we've aligned these standards vertically also, it's important to note, so that students are continuing to build on age-appropriate civic virtues as they advance through the grade levels, pre-K actually, all the way through graduation. All right, we are almost there. So we also launched the application for the $35 million to support Oklahoma students with a school counselor corps. Ready Together Oklahoma plan has opened that. We've had hundreds apply, and we are going to be funding hundreds of new positions in school districts around the social emotional needs, the academic pursuits of both academic guidance counselors as well as those in the licensed professional counselors as well. So these relief dollars are part of the American Rescue Plan, and they will fund 50% of the salary. So the district will have 50% to pay as well. And we will see a variety of individuals, including social workers and even recreational therapists. More than 180 districts applied for that, and it will go all the way through 2023-24 school year. And we will be announcing those, I believe, next week. So with that said, I want to share with you a video, and you can look to the screen here and learn a little bit about what we are talking about when we say recreational therapy and how it helps young learners with behavioral or mental health needs. And recreational therapy is related services under IDEA as well, so it applies for students with disabilities.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Recreational therapy, literally we use recreational tasks to help with therapy. Things like playing in the pool, swimming.
She loves it. You ready?
This is called a warm water therapy lab for our Oklahoma State University recreational therapy students.
You got it?
Yeah. And the clients that they work with come from Stillwater Public School. We usually service anywhere from 9 and 10-month-old up to about 13 or 14. We have children with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, kids on the autism spectrum. Some of them can't walk on land, but when you put them in the water, they can work on walking skills because the fear of falling is kind of taken away in the water. So we work on physical things like upper extremity strength, lower extremity strengthening, walking. We do cognitive tasks. So you'll see that they'll have a cup with coordinating colors of objects, so we can work on color identification. We can do sequencing, counting, numbers, matching. We work on a lot of social things. If you are scared or frightened, how do you communicate that instead of just yelling?
For special ed, we always talk about having students participate as much as they can in their world, in social life. And so a lot of these kids with a lot of physical disabilities can't do the same things that other children may be able to do. So someone has to work with them on really how to do that. If they have that, they're going to do better academically and functionally.
I've literally seen kids that would be clinging to you, needing two people to get them off, and we can literally put them in flotation equipment now, and they can go from one end of the pool to the other.
Take it with your right hand.
With just somebody right there encouraging them.
Good job. Good job.
I've seen kids that have like attention span of less than 30 seconds that can now do 2 or 3 activities, one after the other, and stay attentive through the entire task. I have some kids that I've worked with since they were 18 months to 2 years old, and they're in middle school now. And to just remember where they started and how far they've come, it's very rewarding.
High five. You give me one. Good job.
Possible action on the minutes of the May 17th, 2021 special state board meeting. So we'll start with that. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? All right.
Second.
Thank you. Motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Lennox.
Aye.
Superintendent.
Aye. All right, that motion carried. Now let's move to discussion of possible action on the May 24th, 2021 special state board of education meeting. Is there a motion to approve there?
So moved. Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Lennox.
Aye.
Superintendent.
Thank you, that motion carries. And now, discussion of possible action on the minutes of the May 27th, 2021 special state board of education meeting. So motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Lennox.
Aye.
Superintendent.
Aye. All right, thank you very much. Okay, now, and let me just also mention, I did pass over the recognition of our U.S. presidential scholars. We're actually going to wait. We want them to be able to be here, and so it did not work for them to be here this time, so we will see them at one of the future board meetings. Now, item 5, public comment. We have 3 who have signed up for public comment, and the first is Nathan Estelle, Vice President of Educator Certification for Pearson. You can go to the podium, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And let me just remind. 4 minutes. Very good.
Very good.
Yes.
Good morning, Superintendent Hoffmeister, members of the board. For the record, my name is Nathan Estelle, and I represent the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, and that's the company with which the state is currently contracted to deliver educator licensure assessments. I am here today to speak to you about your agenda item 11 related to teacher certification, and I appreciate the opportunity for you hearing my remarks. The description of item 11 indicates to us, and it seems to presume that a majority of states use an off-the-shelf licensure assessment. And I think it's important to note that many states have chosen a customized solution, states like Oklahoma. That's one that's not off the shelf, a one-size-fits-all solution, and they do so because they want their educator licensing programs to be intentionally aligned to the state's standards, to the state's goals, and to the state's priorities. They want a program that's designed for the state and controlled by the state, with deep and meaningful involvement of in-state educators and policymakers. And they want a program that can swiftly adjust to provide flexible solutions to your changing educational goals. Due to the short notice of this agenda item and the time that I was provided to get to this meeting, I was only able to get a preliminary note from my organization's attorneys on this matter, so I want to read it to be sure I'm careful. I quote, "There's no evidence to show that the praxis has been used by a majority of the states. The praxis series assessments offered by Educational Testing Service have not gone through normal protocols for anywhere near a majority of the states, and therefore would be a violation of Oklahoma Statute 70, Section 6-190, subsection H, to use ETS praxis tests in this manner. Hence, the ETS praxis test cannot be used pursuant to this Oklahoma statute," end quote. With that in mind, I'm here to ask you why Oklahoma would surrender its sovereignty to establish and assess standards for its teachers when Oklahoma can achieve what it needs through its currently selected vendor. Teachers in Oklahoma should meet standards that are set by this state's educators. The Oklahoma Office of Educational Quality and Accountability issued a request for proposals in July of 2020. The RFP set forth standards for assessments for educators in the state. At the conclusion of that fair and competitive process, Pearson was awarded a contract to deliver services for the state's educator licensure assessments beginning in September of 2021. ETS did not offer its praxis program for consideration as a responsive alternative to this RFP. The Certification Examinations for Oklahoma Educators Program, or the CEOE, enables Oklahoma to support its future teachers to enter the classroom and meet their full potential to become exceptional educators. I would like to share with you just a few of the enhanced features of the program that we deliver on behalf of the OEQA. We have lower test fees for all candidates and free test vouchers for those candidates with financial need. We have free interactive practice tests and free annotated score reports. We'll soon be implementing a free retake program for candidates who don't meet the state's qualifying score, and we'll be offering remote online testing to provide candidates to take the opportunity to take the test at home or in a certified testing center. Further, we understand from Oklahoma's recent plan submitted to the United States Department of Education that it wishes to provide up to 5,000 teachers a year for 3 years with scholarships for teacher licensure tests. We applaud this innovative initiative, and we would be happy to partner with the State Department of Education to work with you to distribute CEOE testing vouchers to those candidates that most need them. In closing, I will leave you with our commitment to work with all Oklahoma stakeholders and your educators to deliver the services necessary to provide Oklahoma's students with access to quality educators, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Thank you. All right, and next we have on the agenda Sandra Kent with the, do I need to stay with the order? Okay, because these are about agenda items. So yours is, I don't believe, part of one of the agenda items. So this next item is Amy Boone. And Amy has a child in Western Heights School District, and she'll be addressing agenda item number 12C.
Good morning, Superintendent Hoffmeister and board members. Thank you guys for letting me speak to you this morning about this very important matter going on. As a member of the Western Heights community, I understand better than many the concerns and troubles facing our district. The Western Heights community knows that there are real issues within the district, and we have started taking steps to resolve these issues and will continue to do so. In April, we voted in a new board member that we felt better aligned with the principles and values of Western Heights. We have also reported issues to our local school board that have went unaddressed and unresolved. This has pushed our determination to elect new board members as each seat becomes available. We do not have at our disposal the right to recall board members. If this had been an option, we would have taken that path. We have also reported issues to anyone we felt could help us, including the State Department of Education. While we greatly appreciate the actions that the Oklahoma State Board of Education has taken thus far, these actions have left Western Heights parents, students, educators, and staff with an apprehensive and anxious feeling. The heart of any community are their schools. When you meet someone that you went to the same school as you feel instant kindred with them. We do not want to lose our Western Heights family. When a school is closed, it takes away more than just an educational outlet for our children. It takes away community pride and unity. We know our district is in a dire situation and that the community is doing all we can to fix these problems. We feel that with proper guidance from the Oklahoma State Department of Education, coupled with the election of a new leadership, we can accomplish the changes that Western Heights students, teachers, staff, and kids deserve. As we often say, jets fly together, and we call on the State Board of Education to ensure that our squadron stays whole. We believe that a solution can be found. If that means Western Heights is under the guidance and supervision of the state, then so be it. We do not want to lose our accreditation and be annexed to other districts. If the State Board of Education, a willing Western Heights School Board, qualified administration, and the community come together, we can resolve the problems at Western Heights and give our kids the education that should be afforded to all Oklahoma kids. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now, Sandra Kent, Executive Director of Oklahoma A+ Schools Institute, University of Central Oklahoma. Please come and share with the board.
Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. I, with everybody else, I guess, say welcome back. We all decided this was a good time to come and see you. I am coming to you not just as the Executive Director of A+ Schools Institute this morning, but as a former teacher and principal and an administrator principal who had the opportunity to go through the A+ process myself before becoming the Executive Director. Essentially, I want to tell you about us. You may have known us as just A+ Schools, but 2 years ago, we were named an institute at the university, which has allowed us to expand our programming and do a little bit more than just the network. We're an innovative institute that's dedicated to quality education that ignites imagination, creativity, and innovation in students, teachers, and schools. We've had a great partnership with the State Department from the beginning of our 19 years. Superintendent Hoffmeister, Dr. Miller, Dr. Koss, Dr. Mon have all spoken at our events. We've worked together on different professional developments along the way, and we've always enjoyed our partnership with the State Department. It's very important to us. Now that we are an institute, the network is still our premier project and always will be, and I'll speak a little bit more about that. But we also offer arts integration workshops. Teachers learning creatively is what we call them now, since we've learned a lot more about doing online professional development this past year, as everybody else has. We have an annual conference, which we just held a week ago. Leadership development, poetry out loud. We partner with the Oklahoma Arts Council to oversee that project with our high school students. Special projects such as our Great Boeing STEAM Challenge with the Boeing Company. We're very proud of that. We've been working with schools in Oklahoma City and providing in classroom during the day STEAM projects. And again, this past year we had a very successful project being all online. And we also do a lot of associate work where we are able to work with people outside of the state where they pay fees for us to do that, where all of our in-state work we've been able to provide to schools at no cost. Over our 19 years, we have trained over 100 schools into our network. Those represent 80 public schools, 12 charter schools, and 10 private schools. Currently, we have 59 active schools in the network, and this year we're adding 6 new schools that will be coming in July to spend a 5-day retreat with us. Probably not a retreat for them, but more of a summit and training where they'll be entrenched in the A+ philosophy. Our essentials are what all of our work is built on, and it's evidence-based. It was research-based for not just our 19 years, but back into North Carolina over 25 years ago. Our essentials are arts, curriculum, multiple learning pathways, experiential learning, enriched assessment, collaboration, infrastructure, and climate. It's noted again, we do not charge our member schools. It's an application process and their commitment to what we do. We as an organization are responsible for 85% of our funding. While we are at UCO and we are part of UCO, UCO does not provide our funding. We find that funding, we write grants. At times, we had state money, and through the State Department, we were funded 11 of our 19 years. And that provided us over $4 million in those 19 years. At this time, we do not have funding with the department. That is a part of our partnership we would like to see come back, and part of my reason for being here today to reintroduce ourselves to you. Each year, we impact over 20,000 students, 1,700 teachers. We increase both attendance for teachers and students. We've had increased academic achievement in our schools, and we bring higher engagement and increased joy to schools and students and teachers. That's all documented in our research and continues to be ongoing research based that we are able to do that. We have brought in a lot of funds from out of state, from in-state, as I said, and whenever we have state funding, it helps us to leverage those other funds as well because they really like that public and private partnership. With reinstated funds, we will be able to accept and serve all of the interested schools. We do get a waiting list. People really would like to have the ability to do what we do. We have a goal to be in every county across the state. We do serve from early childhood through high school. In fact, this year we're actually serving a school in Tulsa that is working with intellectually disabled adults, but operates in a school format. So we have included them this year. We would like to continue to expand our services to help schools meet ACEs and ICAPs and equal access and the individual teacher trainings. All of those things we can help and partner. And again, we've done a lot of partnerships in combination. Currently, I know also the art tech that's going on. We're very excited about that, and we've been in contact and collaboration. We don't want to replace anything. We simply want to partner. And I just wanted to come before you today. Some of you I've met before, some I've not had the opportunity. So I wanted to come and introduce myself and reintroduce Oklahoma A+ Schools Institute to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, board members, item number 6 on the agenda is the consent docket. There are 3 items here, which might be a record. Of only 3. So let me ask if you have questions or if there's a motion to approve.
I just had a question on the teacher certifications as far as just a request, I guess, to get the total flipped because of the start of the new fiscal year and on July 1 for these requests. And so if we can, I would really like us to see kind of where everything landed last year as far as the number of teacher emergency certifications, kind of this breakdown just for the past school year. I think would be helpful, and then in comparison to maybe some of the previous years, just to see where we landed.
Okay. Very good.
Yes. It seems like to me some of the larger school districts had an extra large number, like Oklahoma City was over 300. And so it compared to last year, how does that compare to the request last year for those large school districts? Or is it telling us something that we need to be really speaking to? So.
Great question. I think it is pretty common. Yeah, so Teach for America is part of those that have to be emergency certified. And so they'd be included in that. So they already know the people, the names, the positions, and so you'll see that. Am I saying that correctly?
You are. I would just add, Mr. Flanagan, that this is pretty comparable to last year, with the caveat that we're just now getting these for the next school year. So there's a chance that these larger districts are ahead of where they were last year. So we may see fewer going forward from those districts. It's just hard to tell, given that this is the first one.
Okay.
So we definitely will have our eye on that. The research project that is every 3 years in statute, the supply and demand study for the teaching profession is due by the end of this year. And so we'll have a lot of data to share as that research is completed. And this will be part of that. All right, great point. We'll keep our eye on that as that's been one of our top priorities for a long time, solving that shortage. Okay,
I will make a motion to approve the consent docket.
all right, so we have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. Okay, any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Brighton.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Mr. Flanagan.
Yes.
Mr. Bobette.
Aye.
Ms. Mims.
Aye.
Superintendent Comments.
All right, thank you, that motion carries. Item 7, this is discussion of possible action to approve the Reading Sufficiency Act screeners for students in kindergarten through 3rd grade, and we will have Melissa Aldrin, the Director of Reading Sufficiency to speak to this presentation. Thank you.
Superintendent Hoffmeister and honorable members of the board. Agenda item 7A is discussion and possible action to approve Reading Sufficiency Act screeners for students in kindergarten through 3rd grade. All right. And are we able to get that? There we go. Thank you. So each student in kindergarten through 3rd grade, on the next slide, Jeremy. Thank you very much. As we get used to our,
Right. On Zoom, we needed someone to click for us.
yes, there we go. And let me see if I can get the clicker to work. There we go, thank you. Okay, so universal screening assessments are a required component of the Reading Sufficiency Act. These are very brief, simple assessments which measure general early reading ability and are given to all students in kindergarten through 3rd grade at the beginning, middle, and end of each academic year in those grade levels. Providing a definition of a screening assessment provides a guide for districts to choose an appropriate instrument that is brief, valid, reliable, and evidence-based, conducted with all students in order to identify students who are at risk or not at risk of academic difficulty in the area of reading and need additional or alternative instruction. Just a brief background on where we have been. Again, Reading Sufficiency Act has been in place since 1997. Screening has been a part of that for that time. But we recently reviewed these assessments in 2018. We went from a list of 15, which was a very broad list, some of which we felt did not need to be there. And we wanted to conduct a very formal, controlled review of those assessments to ensure that we were using the best products for students in Oklahoma. There are currently 7 approved assessments from which districts may choose to use according to the needs of their student population. And the purpose of this review this year was to determine if any additional assessments were eligible for approval to provide those options for districts from which to choose. The review team consisted of 21 Oklahoma teachers and administrators, including general and special education teachers, literacy coaches, coordinators for reading and English language arts, a speech language pathologist, administrators, and school psychometrists, just to ensure that we had a very broad view. This also represented 14 districts across the state. We were fortunate to have a high level of expertise in this team, including several members with advanced degrees and credentials that required intensive training in the area of reading and language. This expertise was critical in helping team members make informed decisions and recommendation for this board's consideration today. The review process began in December of 2020 as members of the Curriculum and Instruction Office, along with members of the Office of Special Education, worked together to establish criteria for effective screening instruments and to write a request for information, or RFI. The RFI was sent to vendors in February, and vendors had a month to prepare a proposal to meet the requirements listed. During this time, members for the review team were selected, and those members met with staff from OSDE to learn how to conduct the review of materials. The review team began their work in late March. First, members reviewed their assigned materials individually, and then members who reviewed the same materials met to build consensus and agree on a recommendation for that product. And based on those results, those recommendations are brought before you today. So universal screening assessments recommended for approval meet the criteria of a screening assessment as defined by the OSDE and have the ability to monitor student progress throughout the year. They also demonstrate strong evidence for reliability and validity, which means they measure the intended skills and they provide consistent results. These assessments are also aligned to the Oklahoma academic standards for English language arts and assess all skills required by the Reading Sufficiency Act. Finally, screening assessments recommended for approval also meet the requirements for reporting and accommodations for student subgroups as outlined in the RSA statute. So just for your reference, we currently again have 7 assessments that were approved in 2018. Those are listed on the screen for you today for your reference. These were not reviewed. We did not want to take any screenings off of the list and make those unavailable for districts. We only wanted to be able to add on the choices that they might want to be able to consider. So we are pleased to submit 3 screening assessments for your consideration. Each of these assessments meet the established criteria for universal screening, and the team has recommended them for approval to be added to the list of universal screening assessments. So these are Amira, I Hope Mifflin Harcourt, iReady Diagnostic from Curriculum Associates, and Math Reading Fluency from NWEA. Are there any questions?
I have a question on, is this an additional NWEA test in addition to the other, or did they replace their test?
No, ma'am. Yeah, it's a great question. They are actually 2 separate assessments. The NWEA had submitted reading fluency in the 2018 review, but had not completed the reliability and validity studies at that time. So they have resubmitted. So there are 2 options under NWEA. They are related, but they are 2 different tests. One is Math Growth, which has been in effect for some time, and then the new one would be reading fluency, which is a newer assessment that they've recently developed.
Is there any, oh, go ahead. I just have one more. I know the other list, you said they were not reviewed again. They were last reviewed in 2018. Is there a period where those will be re-reviewed?
We are intending to do this on a regular basis, about every 3 years. At this time, since we moved this up just a little bit because of the dyslexia screening requirement, which you'll be hearing about in the next agenda item, because they are very tightly related. The other portion of that is coming off of our pandemic, and with the struggles that districts have had, we wanted to provide as much consistency as possible and did not feel that this was the time to remove a choice from a district when they're just trying to get back on their feet and get back into the business of learning. On top of that, the criteria from the 2018 study to this study did not change. So it would be very unlikely that any of them would have come off based off of that, because we didn't really change what the expectations were.
Are we accomplishing, we've been in this program now for several years, and have we seen the growth that we expect to see as a result of this activity?
That's a great question, Mr. Flanagan. You are correct. We have been in this for quite some time, and there have been many, many changes that have occurred for RSA over that time as well. Just recently, in the last few years, we have just seen it start settling down and trying to get that shift to instruction rather than on just simple compliance. If you'll recall, the 3rd grade retention part of reading sufficiency it was passed in 2012, began in 2014. During that time, since I have been here for the last 4 years and we've been tracking those scores, those scores have seen some improvement, not a lot, but it's been somewhat. What we have been really focusing on here lately is trying to ensure that our teachers are well equipped to address the needs of students, and that districts have wonderful materials in place to meet their needs, which comes back to what Superintendent was addressing earlier, was the science of reading training that will be offered for 10,000 teachers over the next 3 years, which will have great strides, we think, in helping to improve those scores for reading sufficiency.
Can you speak to the time frame that the students actually spend testing? That teachers actually spend in preparing them for those tests? You mentioned that there are 3 at the beginning, the middle, and towards the end. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So with one of the requirements for a universal screener is to ensure that we have brevity in our assessment. In other words, we don't want students sitting in front of a test for an extended period of time, multi-day, which such is what we do maybe for our state test, because it's covering so many standards. Universal screeners are what we call general outcome measures. they address in a general way those broad skills that we want to make sure that students are able to do. So we see two different types of assessments on this list. One might be computer adaptive assessments, in which a student would be interacting with a computer, and that as they answer questions, it takes them in different directions. If they answer it right, they get significantly harder assessed questions. If they are struggling, it moves them to lower skills so that they can see where it is that they have landed. The other type of assessment that a teacher and student might give one-on-one are generally called curriculum-based measures, in which they usually have maybe a 1-minute time to it. Because the skills that we're assessing, we want to get to automaticity. We want them to be able to do very quickly. So it's not about assessing speed, it's assessing, do they have this skill down automatically so that they don't have to use working memory to thinking about it, okay?
I guess my question is more to the time frame that they spend. Do they spend 5 days? Do they spend a week doing this? Or is it a 1-day test, they're done? How?
From the student perspective or from the teacher perspective?
From
the student perspective, it's less than a day. It should be, general rule of thumb is about 30 minutes, although as we get older, sometimes it might go up to an hour, but that would probably be the maximum amount of time at that time, just to get a broad idea of where are we with those general reading skills.
It could be even less.
It could be even less in some cases. And one of the things that we do have published for districts to refer to is for each of these assessments that are approved, we have what the average time to administer that assessment is. So that in some cases it might be 5 minutes, and in some cases it might be closer to 30 minutes or 40 minutes. And the district can then make an informed decision about what would best meet the needs of their student population with that in mind.
The reason why I ask is that oftentimes you'll hear from educators and even parents and also students that they spend so much time testing throughout the year, which references these 3 different screening tests that are taken. That doesn't even include the state test that teachers are having to prepare the students for. So I just kind of want to speak to the concerns of all 3 stakeholders on the over-testing of students, where they're spending less time on instruction and more time on testing.
So the purpose of a screening assessment, in order to be brief, is it fits within a system called multi-tiered systems of support. In other words, to identify who is it that needs something and who is it that is ready to move forward with instruction, so that we can quickly identify who needs additional attention and instruction and who's ready to just move forward with grade level instruction, or who maybe needs enrichment opportunities as well. The screening assessments, again, like I said, serve really 2 purposes. One is to very quickly identify this is a student who's at risk or not at risk. And if they're at risk for reading difficulties, we may need to dig a little deeper. If they're not at risk, we're ready to move on. If the second purpose is really for to get a systems look overall at how is our system working within a school, a district, even sometimes at the state. If we have a lot of students who are showing up at risk, more than 20%, then that means that we need to focus more on our core instructional practices, our on grade level instruction, as opposed to trying to throw more interventions, because interventions are very costly financially as well as a matter of resources and time. And the fewer interventions we can address, the better. We would rather take this from a prevention model, and that's what these screeners allow us to do, is look at this from a preventative point of view. How can we take care of this more quickly? Because the longer we allow problems to progress, the more expensive as far as times, resources, and money it is to rectify any of those issues. And it makes a big difference for those kids as well. So part of the concern that I hear from you, and it's a very valid concern, because I've heard it many times, is ensuring that teachers and administrators in our districts understand the purpose of assessments and how to use that data effectively. Sometimes we will want to make one thing be it, and that would be the same thing as saying, here's a hammer, go build a car with just this tool. Our assessments are tools that we use to inform our instruction and to make it more effective and efficient. But also sometimes without that solid understanding, I might see a school that's using 2 or 3 different screening assessments, which all have the same purpose, as opposed to just using one and then moving on with their instruction. So ensuring that we know how to use that data so that we're not over-testing as you're concerned, but we also are able to get to the information that we do need. It's very much a balancing act. You are very right.
It's a really important point. It's one that we've really tried to tackle head on, and that is why we conducted the study in 2018 with outside researchers to do that independent review, because we inherited a list of tools to meet this that weren't even screeners. Some of them were very extensive diagnostic tools that took a lot of time, like you're describing. And so districts just didn't know which tool to use. So now they can only pull off of those that have gone through this process. And they can see if one of the other instruments that they might use in their district for other reasons already is offered with that particular vendor and can satisfy that screener portion. But there's also a difference that's sometimes hard to disentangle between what is required in state statute and what a district elects to do. And we really don't have any control over what a district elects to do. And some districts do spend more time and focus on these kinds of diagnostic various interventions than others. And perhaps in some situations, there are greater needs, and so they are doing different levels, but it all gets referred to in one more generalized concept of doing a lot of testing. And so we want to minimize that, and then the other piece is be more sure that we're following the science of reading so that the instruction works and that we move forward instead of testing it, just seeing that kids continue to struggle. And so that'll be, when all of this comes together, to Mr. Flanagan's point, that's when we begin to see the kind of change. This past school year was the first year, am I right on this? My memory is that this past school year was the first year that the required new screeners went into effect.
Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. So, that did give them a little bit, give districts a little bit of a pause. Oh, excuse me. I believe it was. Yes. It's still a Thursday morning.
Great discussion. Yes.
Sorry, I just have one other question, even though I said I didn't. I don't know if it's a question for you or the next, but since they're related, it looks like to me that all of the RSA screeners have a dyslexia screener that's kind of tied to them. Is that the case? Because the reason I ask is if a school district has one RSA assessment, but that company isn't doing a dyslexia, will they, have to pay for something else?
It's a great question, and we conducted this review in tandem so that, for that very reason, because we knew that these two things were very tightly tied together. So let me reverse your statement just a little bit. All of the screeners proposed for acceptance for dyslexia are attached to an RSA screener, but there are a few, very small number of RSA screeners that do not have an attached dyslexia screener. And how that would work, according to the statute, is that a student would go through the RSA screener, the universal screener. If they do not meet the grade level target for, at that time on the universal screener, then they would then go through the next level for that dyslexia screener. And in most cases, that's going to be just a simple sub-test or two attached to that to go a little bit further. And I know Michelle can give more information on that in our next presentation. For those that elect to use a universal screener for RSA that does not have an attached dyslexia screener, yes, they would have to utilize another screener to meet that requirement under statute. Some of the companies either submitted something for consideration for dyslexia that did not meet our requirements that we had in statute, and some just did not submit because they don't have something available for that purpose at this time. So that would be a decision made by our local control districts. Okay.
Any comments? Okay, so we would entertain a motion to approve the recommendations of that committee. And,
So moved.
thank you.
Second.
All right. Now, any further questions? Okay, call the roll, please.
Ms. Williams Bradley.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Aye. Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bovee.
Aye.
Ms. Munnings.
Aye.
Superintendent Thomas.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the hard work. We all thank those members of the committee for that work. And I'm very appreciative. If any of them are here today, we thank you for that work. Okay, now let's move to under special education, item number 8A, which is discussion of possible action to approve the dyslexia screening assessments for students in kindergarten through third grade. Michelle Berry. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for reviewing this information today. Jeremy, do you have the? No, it's the other one, I'm sorry. It does say dyslexia universal screening.
All right. Apologize. We love technology, but if we don't. Thank you.
We are.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning, my name is Michelle DeBerry, Superintendent Hoffmeister, honorable members of the State Board. This is agenda item discussion and possible action to approve the dyslexia screening assessments under the Reading Sufficiency Act. So this is the legislative requirements. Beginning in the 22-23 school year and for each school year thereafter, any student enrolled in kindergarten, first, second, or third grade in a public school in this state who is assessed to the Reading Sufficiency Act of Oklahoma statutes who is not meeting grade level targets in reading after the beginning of the year assessment shall be screened for dyslexia. Screenings may also be requested for a student by his or her parent, teacher, counselor, speech language pathologist, or school psychologist. A screening is a process that helps identify students who are at risk for not meeting those grade level learning goals. The dyslexia screening assessment is not intended to diagnose dyslexia. Screeners in reading can help quickly measure important reading skills and guide and support teaching and learning decisions. They can help capture each child's reading and language strengths and weaknesses in the key early stages of development, ultimately to identify issues that could result in a later problem. So what we're looking for here is the student at risk for dyslexia? Is the student making reading progress? And this information will help schools and families know if the student is responding to those reading interventions.
Can I ask one question? I'm sorry to interrupt in the middle, but just on the sentence, dyslexia screening does not diagnose dyslexia. Assuming that the screener does say that they show signs of it, then would they be referred to someone that would do a more extensive?
Possibly. It would be up to the district and the family to look at the data collected by that instrument, and that's for that individual student to make decisions about either further general ed interventions or a referral for a special education evaluation.
The key is to know that a student needs that explicit phonics instruction, which not everyone is following, which is why we want the science of reading being taught everywhere, because then the whole general population is receiving those same supports. But this at least helps to identify where that struggle.
And keep in mind that the screener helps identify risk, but it also helps to gauge risk. So are we at the bottom end of risk where there's just a few things and we can support that through some specific general ed interventions? Or are we seeing on the other end of the spectrum a lot of risk? And then again, we would probably need to talk about some other options that the family and the school district could pursue for the student. That answer your question?
Thank you.
So in 2020, House Bill 2804 passed requiring students who, again, are not performing at those grade level targets on the universal screening assessment to participate in a screening assessment to identify risk for dyslexia. So they will only be screened for dyslexia after that beginning of the year assessment, unless a parent or another education professional requests a screening later. This statute requests that the Oklahoma State Board of Education approve a list of screening instruments for this purpose by July 2021. Again, this is the same team that Melissa just talked about that we had, and we, again, did this review in tandem. So the same professionals there, again, in those 14 school districts were represented. So again, between the Office of Curriculum Instruction and our Office in Special Education Services, we established that baseline criteria for the selection of dyslexia screening instruments. Basically, we built the rubric. And then we had team members, again, like Melissa stated earlier, that each team member was assigned 1 to 2 assessments to review independently. Each product received 3 to 5 independent reviews. And then the team got together to develop consensus as to whether or not to put forward a recommendation for your consideration. Again, as outlined in statute, the components of the dyslexia screening instrument were identified, and those are phonological awareness, advanced phonemic awareness, sound symbol recognition, alphabet knowledge, decoding and encoding skills, rapid naming, and developmental language. I will tell you that we encountered a bit of a problem with this as researchers and professionals in the field of reading and the science of reading right now are not agreeing on what the definition of advanced phonemic awareness is. And so not all of our screening assessments have that component. We have a workaround for that we'll present to you. But that was an issue that we had to talk through and work through and come up with some different methods to get that information to meet the requirement in statute. Again, to ensure the quality assessments meet the needs of Oklahoma districts, we identified 10 categories for the scoring guide or rubric for dyslexia screening instruments. We wanted the teams to be able to clearly distinguish the purpose of the screener. Again, we wanted great evidence of reliability and validity. The screener had to assess the required skills. We had administration requirements that the administration would be available to be given by a certified general education teacher. We wanted something that had accommodations for our English language learners and for students with other disabilities. The data management piece had to be, we looked at that very critically so that school districts, again, would have that important data. We wanted something that had resources for families. Again, that's support for administration and professional development for districts. So when I was talking about the advanced phonemic awareness, really the definition of that is manipulating phonemes or sounds within a word. So this could include the addition of a sound, the deletion of a sound, or the substitution of a sound. And many of the screening assessments submitted for this review met all of the criteria except for this one. So in order to provide districts with a reasonable number of assessments for dyslexia screening, is the recommendation of this team to utilize the phonological awareness screening test. It's called the PAST as a required supplement when this skill is missing from the overall dyslexia screener. The PAST was developed by Dr. David Kilpatrick and is a reliable and valid open access assessment that addresses only phonemic awareness skills, and it takes about 5 minutes to administer this assessment. So this would be free for the districts to use. These are our recommended for you to consider today, the dyslexia screening assessments. So in the first column is the company, the vendor. The second column is the specific screening assessment title. And in the third column, you'll see that all of these do have an RSA companion, with the exception of the HMH Amira product, and that has already been recommended. And so we will have that option as well. For those that you see the asterisk behind, again, these are the assessments that do not have that advanced phonemic awareness component that is required by statute. And so again, our workaround for districts would be to give them access to the phonological awareness screening test. And they would have to administer that in tandem with one of the other products. So you can see that really only 3 have that component already built into their screener. And we would, if we only allowed those 3, then we would only have 1, 2, 3, 4. We would have 4 that we would have to exclude from that list. So we felt like in order to give districts a bigger variety to choose from, that we needed to consider that, or recommend that you consider that. Any questions?
Once in place, how do we know the districts, somebody on your team monitoring that the districts are actually doing it the way you want them to? How does that work?
So we've started coming up with specific procedures for the districts to follow, and these are a few of those. We've also already developed an instrument to use for families that districts can share with families about dyslexia and resources for that. In addition, these are the district reporting requirements, again, established by the statute. And so this will go into effect. Districts will have to start using the dyslexia screener in the 22-23 school year. So they'll have this coming school year to make decisions about which product they want to choose for the individual district. And then these are the reporting requirements that districts will have to report to the State Department of Education at the end of that 22-23 and every year subsequent.
Can I ask about the timing? If they go through the RSA screener, and does it in real time say they do not meet, and so then it will take them automatically into this, or they'll take the RSA screener that gets looked at, and then they'll have to take the dyslexia screener on a different day?
I will probably take it on a different day, and we will extend the time reporting requirements. At the beginning of the year, RSA screener has to be reported to the State Department. Is it October 1st or October 31st, Melissa?
October 31st.
Okay, and so we would, October 1st, that's what I thought, but I was scared to say. And then, so we would give them till the end of that semester probably to follow up with an RSA, with a dyslexia screener. Some of the components of the dyslexia screener they may have already had when they did the RSA component or the universal screener, so it may just be giving them a few extra sub-tests to look at that and then to pull that data in and again have families and districts look at that together for the individual student, what's going on with the individual student.
And just for our awareness, once they have been screened and identified that they need the assistance, what's the guidance and the next steps provided to the districts of the services that will be provided for them?
So we have set forth, I didn't print that out for you, but I can get it out. So what we've established so far is that the districts would look at those individual students, because we can't make blanket decisions on things like this, because when it's impacting one student doesn't necessarily reflect how it's impacting another student. So really putting it in the hands of the district to say, this student is not doing well in reading, this is how we can adjust intervention, which is the purpose of a screening. We want to be able to adjust what our instruction is, and then follow that up. Again, parents would have the opportunity to request a special education evaluation, or the district may want to pursue that. But again, it's not something that we feel like we should mandate that they would automatically have to pursue that, because again, some of our students are going to respond to general education intervention and they shouldn't automatically qualify for special education services. I answer your question.
Do districts do like the deeper dive, like if the screener does and the teacher and parents decide that this is a student that may have dyslexia, do the districts provide that actual diagnosis, or would they go to kind of an outside the district professional to have that done?
So school districts are required to do any kind of special education evaluation that a student would need. So dyslexia is generally characterized as a specific learning disability in reading. And so, yes, the school district, school psychologist or school psychometrist could and would be the appropriate person to do the evaluation once the parent consents for that.
Once those deficiencies have been identified, then the tools that we apply is not the same for every student. It's customized to that one student, is it not? So that hopefully they make better progress than they had before.
Very much so. So when we look at these skills that were identified in the statute, a student may have very good phonological awareness skills. They may have their phonics down, but their reading comprehension may not be there. And that's another characteristic of dyslexia. They may have that sound symbol recognition, but again, be deficient in some other form of language. And so, yes, the intervention for a student with dyslexia or specific learning disability in reading is very specific to that individual student and what their needs are. That would be reflected in their IEP if they qualify for special education services. Any other questions? Is there anything else?
I move to approve.
Second. All right, motion is second. Any discussion or questions? All right, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bright.
Aye.
Ms. Hernandez. Mr. Bynum. Mr. Puppet.
Aye.
Ms. Mendes.
Aye.
Superintendent.
Aye. All right, thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation and appreciate the discussion. It's a very important topic. All right, now board members, we have 9A, which is a presentation from Jackie White, the Executive Director of Indian Education. And this is, thank you, and I see Marnie Guthrie there, who supports this work as well. And thank you, Ms. White.
I'm old school. I give a clicker to someone else. How's that? First of all, Superintendent Hoffmeister and Board, thank you so much for allowing me to present to you today. Those who don't know, I am a member of the Cherokee Nation of Tahlequah, and I spent 44 and a half years in public education. I've also was a consultant for the Muskogee, now Nation, not Creek, they've taken that out. And I also worked with Tulsa Public Schools as they were working through some issues with Indian education. Monty asked me earlier about my career. We were laughing about it because I'm old and I'm proud of it. I'm from Shakota, through Muskogee, through Tulsa Union, and here I am today. So I just want to share with you some information about the OC Board, but I want to recognize Lucianne Harjo, who's the chair of the committee. If you could just, she came today to support me in this endeavor. Most of you know that House Bill 2823 was put into place July 1st of 2010 and will continue through July 1st of 2023. And that particular law went into effect so that this board could support Native American education across the state of Oklahoma. We currently have 39 tribes that are in Oklahoma. 38 of those are federally recognized and 1 is state recognized. We have more Native American students, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, in Oklahoma than any other state in the nation because we are active in identifying our students. And there's a reason behind that for federal funding, but the fact that we are so ingrained in Indian education across our state, we're wanting to expand, and that's what my intentions are. So if you look at the slide, it talks how we want to improve, encourage, identify, analyze, and make recommendations to the Oklahoma State Department of Education, to you as board members. I have on the slides those that are a part of the OC board. It's a variety of individuals who have a keen interest in making Indian education in the state of Oklahoma a high focus on what we do. And you can see there the members. I want to go through here and just take a moment to recognize Robert Bible, who passed away last year, because he was an active member on this board, but he was also a personal friend of mine and was very active across the entire state of Oklahoma in Indian education and was currently an employee of the Muskogee Nation. And I guess the other 4 individuals decided they didn't want the picture. So I visited with the Eric and Michael in the data office. And on October 1st of last year, we had 156,526 of our students identify themselves as Native American. As you know, the federal government says that you can self-identify. So if students go to those schools and they say, I'm in Native American, that goes into the system. But what we're wanting to do for the future is to work with tribes and schools on assisting those students in getting their citizenship. Right now, the state of Oklahoma receives $25.9 million in federal dollars for Indian education. We get more money in Oklahoma than any state in the United States. And right now, we're showing 126,000 students. So my brain's working as a former school administrator. Where are those other students? If we're showing 156,000 in the way, then we as a state and we as tribal members need to work with our schools on making sure our kids and students get their citizenship cards. Right now, as of the last time I talked to the Title VI office, 412 schools are going to receive federal dollars to support Indian education. And I'd like to remind everyone in the room, this is above and beyond. Federal dollars cannot be supplanted, so this comes into public schools above and beyond. All schools are still responsible for educating all students within all schools, whether in all academic areas. I'm going to go through some slides just for information for you, and if you would like to have the entire slide, I will make sure that we get you this information. One of the areas, Johnson O'Malley, for those who don't know, in 2017-18,
I'm actually on the national board. We work very closely with Cole, Langford, all those individuals out of Oklahoma, Montana, Alaska, North Dakota, and South Dakota, because Johnson O'Malley was not a law, and it was not in place to serve Indian students, even though it was mandated in 1934. On December the 24th, I can tell you it was at the end of 2018, the President of the United States signed it into action, and it is now on the books. And all kids across the entire United States now receive funding under Johnson O'Malley, and that money comes to the Bureau of Indian Education. The BIE has now added 7 additional staff members, and we now have 1 person that's assigned full-time to the state of Oklahoma, because we had so many students that will qualify for this money. And we're working very closely with all 39 tribes in Oklahoma to go back and work with tribes and get their citizenship. That is money in schools for students. So we're really excited about that coming into law. If you get bored one night, you can Google it under the Modernization Act for Johnson O'Malley. It's attorney jargon, okay? What's new? When I came to this position, I'd spent all that time on working with tribes, working in public schools. So I came in looking at it in a different perspective. So I want to share with you some things that I heard the board talk about, public schools talk about, and our 39 tribes sharing with me their information. Tribal Consultation Guide. We're in the process of updating our website here at the State Department and bringing new content and new information and updating. I'm going to call it the one-stop shopping. I want schools, tribes, parents to be able to log on to the State Department of Education, open up the Office of Indian Education, and get what they need. I want that link to languages to that department here at the SDE. So we are now going to be a very close-knit group supporting each other and growing our program. So Tribal Consultation Guide, I want you to know that I worked with several tribal entities to look at a new guide, making sure that I did not offend anyone and making sure that we were looking at what the state of Oklahoma would be proud of. I sort of jokingly said to Monty, I want to take our website and make it the best in the entire United States. And several of the tribes said, you know, we were plains in the beginning, and the buffalo are very sacred to many of our tribes, and that was sort of what came about. Then circles of reflection. I want to share with you that in November when I arrived, there was a grant that was put into place, and Oklahoma was asked to participate. And this particular grant, if you'll look at the slide, is from the National Centers of Indian Education project. We were selected for one reason, is because we have so many Native American students that are in our Oklahoma schools. And that's what it was. It was truly a circle of reflection. Currently, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Oregon, and I believe they have now added Montana, are the only states that had started this process. And what we did under the first circle is I visited with several departments, Robin's, Monty's, and said, I need individuals. Because what we had to do was, there were specific questions that we had to answer. We had to reflect how we saw ourselves. Perception is real. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, perception is real. So as we begin to look at ourselves, how did we communicate through Indian education? How did our department link with other departments like the social studies? And I can look at Monty and Robin, it was really an eye-opener because we didn't see things the same way. Or we thought we were better than we were, or we were better than we didn't know we were. It was real interesting. But here's what made the difference. The second circle. I invited State Department, LEAs, local education agencies, and tribal members. So I reached out to the Choctaw Nation, the Muskogee Nation, Osage Nation, Iowa Tribe of Oklahoma, Cheyenne and Arapaho, Tahlequah Public Schools, Stigler Public Schools, Broken Arrow, Edmond, Durant, Oklahoma City, and the State Department. We asked the tribes and the schools the same questions. We didn't match because how they saw us and how we saw them was not the same. And the good part about this collaboration, it caused us to look at things a little different in my Office of Indian Education. So it grew. So what happened after the circles of reflection? Here's what you're seeing now. We are now adding and working with the Kiowa tribe as specific on getting them certified and getting an OCAS code for new languages. We now have started collaboration among the tribes, the schools, and the State Department. And I am now hosting every 3 weeks a Zoom, and we are now inviting all 39 tribes educational leaders, as well as all schools that want to participate. And we're Zooming every 3 weeks and talking about how we can work together and provide services to the Native students in Oklahoma. It is very, I will tell you, it's very exciting because I'm getting calls saying, can I invite so-and-so? Because that school doesn't know what to do. And a kudos to the Federal Programs Department. They have now added on their consolidated application a little box so it will tell me who's in charge of Indian education in those schools, because we do not have a list. A compliment to Superintendent Hoffmeister's office when she hosted the workshop back in February, I think, on trauma. We invited all tribal leaders to attend that. So again, we're taking down every barrier that we can. And those are the languages. And House Bill 1104, I've been working with the RAOs, the accreditation offices, the data offices, because the tribes have said to me that they would like to assist all of the schools in having sessions so the parents can come in and register their students as citizens. I can tell you one of the things I've seen in Oklahoma, and because I live it, my grandchildren are all biracial. They are African American, Creek, Cherokee, Swede, and English. And if I didn't actively say to them, when you go and enroll in schools, you check biracial, but make sure that you register as Native American in what tribe. And what we're finding as I work with the schools is that we're going to do another education course on how important it is to put in Native American because it gets you federal dollars. And I think, and Eric has told me that he'll work very closely with all the individuals that are registrars. The rest of the information I have up there is, again, Federal Summit. The Muskogee Creek Nation has reached out to us, and we will do a federal summit at their facility. And we're going to open the door to all schools that have Native American programs, as well as all 39 tribes. The BIE out of Washington, D.C. has already committed to come. The last time we did that, the Assistant Secretary of Education came, and also the Department of Education for Title VI. So it's going to be a very exciting time. That is a quick overview of what I have going on in the Office of Indian Education.
You've just done amazing work in the time that you've been here. We thank you so very much.
You're quite welcome.
Really thank Lucianne as well for your leadership and all the support that everyone is giving to our students. So thank you. And thank you for this. So we will get invitations to all of the board members for October 7th.
Yes, oh yes.
That is a very special time. All right, so let's take a brief break, and we will come back and resume with item number 10, which is the budget. So if you will take, let's say 5-10 minutes, and be right back.
I think that's right. I just didn't stand up.
Yes.
We're starting to learn more about it.
I want to know.
All right,
like
board
this,
members, we are
the other stuff,
going to
not the
resume
impactful
after
stuff,
our break,
like the
and now it is time for us to call Carolyn Thompson, Chief of Government Affairs, to give a presentation on the 2022.
Expect you to call me. She is very patriotic today.
It's every day.
Okay, good morning, board members and members of the public. Here to present to you today the FY22 budget for Common Education as was passed by the legislature. Just as a matter of orientation, board members, you have the budget book in front of you, which contains the budget spreadsheet, descriptions of each of the items, this presentation, and bill summaries for the two appropriations bills. And then there are copies of the budget spreadsheet out in the hall. If you didn't get one, or feel free to grab one on your way out. This book is also on our website if you want to download that later at your convenience. Okay, so this year, because the legislature passed a line item bill for us, this item is simply for your information. There's not action required by the board because the legislature has essentially dictated to us how we are to spend all of the funds that will be included in this presentation. But it is important for you to be familiar with the items in the budget, as of course you will get to approve our budget request coming up in September. So consider this your preview, and then you cannot have as many questions in September. Sure.
Likely.
Okay, I have attempted to arrange the presentation in order of the spreadsheet, and I'll try to point along the lines that I'm on as we go through the presentation so that you can follow the spreadsheet if you'd like. Okay. So first, I want to share with you the two bills that were passed this year that really dictate the appropriations for education. We were appropriated a total of $3.1 billion for FY22, which is an increase of more than $171 billion. The first bill that we'll discuss is the General Appropriations Bill, House Bill 2900. And then we'll go into Senate Bill 1067, which is our Common Education Budget Limits Bill. This budget represents a 5.5% overall increase to common education, and we believe that it's the largest education budget in state history. So really exciting.
Say that again.
It is the largest education budget in state history. Our finance folks have even verified that.
And we still have in the room our chairman and
John
Chair of appropriations presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, we are very, very grateful for this and excited to put these dollars to work. Okay, so I'll first walk through the General Appropriations Bill, House Bill 2900, and then each of these line items we'll do an overview, and then we'll kind of dig in a little bit deeper. So the first, of course, is the financial support of public schools, which is more commonly known as the funding formula. These are the funds that are distributed to schools based on their weighted average daily membership or student count, which is weighted for additional needs of students, such as those students that are economically disadvantaged or who might have a disability, among other needs. It's important to point out that all of this $2.4 billion will be distributed to schools through the funding formula. And as you can see, this appropriation was increased by more than $136 million, which does in fact trigger class size requirements for kindergarten and first grade. So that provision, there was a threshold put in place in some legislation in 2019 to say once we reach a certain amount of funding, which is $100 million more than we had in 2019, then we will begin to implement those class size limits. So this coming school year, schools will be working to come under those limits, which are 20 students per classroom. There are some certain provisions that allow for schools to go over that, but in general, or to have a waiver of that, but schools will be working toward that in the fall, and that is an exciting occurrence.
Do you know, Carolyn, do waivers come to us?
I believe, I have to get back to you on that. I believe that the one waiver that I'm aware of is the district is 85% bonded indebtedness. I believe that is an automatic waiver, but somebody over here can, it's an automatic waiver, okay. We are still, for a little bit of additional information, we have not collected class size data since 2012. And so we have essentially had to rebuild the class size system, and we'll be doing the class size audit for the first time in 10 years this fall. So there will be a lot of new things coming, and hopefully that will give us new information where we can inform future class size decisions. So there's a report due to the legislature in January, I believe, February, on that information, and then that way we can know where we stand and what kind of investment might we need to go to the other grade levels.
And do we know approximately how many teachers it adds to the system?
That's what we will be hoping to find out in this report. So we'll collect that data for the first time in the fall, and then we'll know hopefully how many teachers we would need to hire on to be able to meet those limits. Okay, the next item is the support of public school activities line item, not to be confused with school district activity funds. This line item is where many of the programs, state mandates that this board and the department administers every year come from. We'll cover that more in detail in a moment. But it did see an increase of $8 million, which we were excited to see that increase as well. The flexible benefit allowance, our teacher health insurance remained flat. And another exciting piece of news is that another $27 million was put into our textbook line item for a total of $60 million, and we'll talk about how that will be used here in just a moment as well. Okay, finally, continuing on with the last items that are spelled out in the general appropriations bill. Both the School Consolidation Assistance Fund and the Teachers Retirement Dedicated Revenue are apportionments, meaning that the amounts are automatically calculated according to statute. These come from the lottery, which we will again talk about in more detail. And then finally, the OSDE's budget for administrative and support functions, unfortunately, remained flat even after the agency had a 7.5% cut last year. So we'll be hoping that maybe that piece can be remedied next year, as those funds would also be greatly appreciated and are needed. Okay, so digging into the funding formula, I want to share a little bit about the revenue streams that make up the formula. These are, of course, the revenue streams that come from the state. I'm not going to cover this whole other presentation, the local revenue streams and the state dedicated revenue streams, but these are the streams that you'll see in your budget spreadsheet there at the top. So, of course, the first and typically the largest, as was the case this year, is from general revenue. An additional $518 million from the General Revenue Fund was put into the funding formula this year. All of the amounts actually on this slide and the next are appropriated based on projections for the coming year, and so it's important for us to be familiar with how these funding streams work, because if a funding stream were to not collect throughout the year, there's a possibility that schools may receive a mid-year cut. So it's important for us to track and understand these funding streams. Next is the Education Reform Revolving Fund, which was appropriated $875 million, which was $139.7 million less than last year, and we'll talk about why that was momentarily. Common Education Fund gave us a little bit more money this year. This is a fund that is capped, so not expecting much more to come from that fund, but small increase there. Lastly, we do receive an apportionment from the Oklahoma Lottery Trust Fund, a small increase this year, $1.7 million. And then also we received funds from mineral leasing, which was down just a little bit this year. And as I mentioned, actually, mineral leasing is one of the funding streams that undercollected this last year. It undercollected by $1.3 million, but because of some other adjustments that were made in the formula, fortunately, school districts did not see that as an adjustment to the factor. I mean, they did lose money off of that because some other adjustments had been made to make up for that, so that's fortunate. So in sum, these are all of the streams that go into the funding formula, and then we will dive in a little bit more deeply. Here we go. Okay, the 1017 fund, as I stated, was appropriated $139.7 million less this year than last year. You can see the revenue streams here on the screen, where 1017 gets its money from. And so anytime one of these revenue streams is adjusted by the legislature, that impacts education funding. So I never thought I'd be, tracking all of these taxes when I took this job, but that's become fun for me to dig in. So you may be surprised to see that there was this decrease in this year, knowing how well the state is doing, but really this is because of legislation that was passed and not necessarily because of economic factors. Doing something wrong? Oh, there it is. Okay. So we had a number of bills that impact the revenue into the 1017 fund. As I just stated, this slide and the next will cover why there was that decrease to the 1017 fund. So primarily, there were a number of measures that were passed last year, and honestly, a rather kind of brilliant move by the legislature. They rerouted some apportionments to education to try to protect education last year in the wake of the pandemic. And because they rerouted them to the 1017 fund, we were able to receive 100% of those funds, whereas if they went to the general revenue fund, we would only be able to receive 95%. Under constitutional requirement, only 95% of those funds in general revenue can be appropriated. So that really benefited the 1017 fund last year. However, as I've already stated, because our economy is doing so well, the legislature was actually able to reverse those apportionments early. So they were set to expire some next year, some the year after, but because the state's doing so well, they went ahead and reversed those early. So the first of those you can see here, House Bill 2894, we had received a temporary apportionment from TRS of $87 million, so that will be an impact to this year. And I'm going to actually skip to the next slide here and I'll go back. Similarly, House Bill 2893 reverses an apportionment for the insurance premium. So this bill reverses that apportionment back to its original source. And similarly, House Bill 2895, which is probably the largest, reverses an apportionment that we were to receive from the Roads Fund, which reduces the 1017 fund by $180 million. Okay, so going back, there were some other bills that weren't reversals. The bottom two here on the screen are, of course, the bills that reduce the corporate income tax and reduce the individual income tax, respectively, and the total impact here is about $15.8 million. These only impact the budget for 6 months of the year because the tax cuts go into effect January 1, so this reflects a 6-month impact, and then next year we'll see the full impact of a full year for these tax cuts going into next year. Okay, and then lastly, the last bullet on this slide, I think this is the second or third year now that we have received the funding from the medical marijuana excise tax. So this year we received $37.5 million from the medical marijuana excise tax. And importantly, this is in addition to the amount that was appropriated for the Redbud Fund, which is the fund, of course, you all are familiar with, assists charter schools and low income school districts with buildings. So I asked one legislator why there was such an increase, and he said, well, I guess a lot of people just smoked a lot of pot during COVID, so we're receiving that benefit here in education. Okay, next, we are still in sources to the funding formula is the Common Education Technology Fund. This fund stays fairly static every year. It is actually capped in statute so that we receive no more than $50 million. But it wholly 100% comes from gross production tax, as you can see here at the bottom of the screen. This was what we were real interested in about a year and a half ago, but fortunately it is healthy this year. Next is the Lottery Trust Fund, which we constantly receive questions about where are all the lottery dollars in Oklahoma, and of course they are in the funding formula, which is then distributed directly to schools. So total available for lottery appropriations to education was more than $76 million, and which was up from last year by $3.8 million. Common Education receives 45% of these funds, as you can see here at the bottom. Then Higher Ed and Career Tech receive 45%, and then 5% each to the School Consolidation Assistance Fund and the Teachers Retirement Dedicated Revenue Fund, which you can see there in your spreadsheet, and we'll talk a little bit more about. Okay, so if you'll jump with me down to line 15 there on the primary, the first part of the budget spreadsheet. You'll see the School Consolidation Assistance Fund, which has an appropriation of $3.8 million. This fund is to primarily fund annexations and consolidations of districts, so they can be reimbursed for various expenses associated with educating students as they're going through a consolidation or an annexation. This fund can also be used for a shared superintendent, so districts who choose to enter into such an agreement can receive funding up to 50% of the cost, up to $150,000 over 3 years for shared superintendents. Those items come out of this fund. And lastly, if the fund contains more than $5 million when we get toward the end of the year after obligations have been met, then we are directed to allocate the overage out to districts, simply so that the fund doesn't continue to amass without it being spent down. So as you can see here on the screen, this current fiscal year, we made a $1.7 million allocation to districts from this fund. We received, of course, the additional 3.8 in appropriations, and so that leaves us roughly just under $9 million in this fund going into next fiscal year, which most likely, unless there's some rash of consolidations or annexations, will be making another allocation out to school districts this next year. Okay, so that covers all of our funding streams that go to the funding formula. Next, I could not let this presentation go by without highlighting the investment that has been made for textbooks this year, which we are very excited about. Really, the first time I think that anybody in the department can remember that this has been more than $33 million. So we are just thrilled with that investment. So state statute actually directs funding to be allocated at $55 per student, which you can see here was met last in FY7, and as our student population has grown and the amount has stayed the same, that has just continued to dwindle the amount per student. Even so, we know that the $55 per student is nowhere near close enough to actually cover the cost of our most expensive subject areas like math and science and English language arts. So fortunately, the legislature allocated an additional $27 million to this line item, bumping it up to $60 million and bumping our projected per student allocation up to $90.81 per student. So districts will be using these funds to purchase science materials, and of course those have been reviewed and are aligned with our state academic standards, which you all adopted last year or the year before. I can't quite remember, but in recent years. And so we're excited that districts will have that money to use new science or to purchase new science materials. Importantly,
can I ask you a question? Do you remember? I remember whenever we approved the budget request. Where does it fall as far as how much does it cost per student to buy the science? Because science was like the most expensive one.
Yeah, I think our request was maybe 60.6. But I think the amounts are in the budgets. Let's see here.
I just remember because the request was more because science was more.
Yes.
We made a change in how we write that budget proposal to actually reflect the cost
Of the
for
subject.
the particular set of subjects.
And I think perhaps now is an important time to mention that our estimates, this will not actually buy a science book for every single student in the state. We do our estimates based on how many science books were purchased in the last school year. Not the last school year, excuse me, the last time science books were adopted, and we do some projections based on current cost of books. While we're excited for this increase, science is unfortunately the most expensive item, but hopefully this will go a long way for me. So I'll have to follow back up with you on the exact amount per book. And it varies depending on what vendor a district may choose. I thought you were going to ask, and I'll go ahead and mention, is that districts can use these funds to purchase online curriculum, to purchase ebooks. They can even use them to purchase the devices that hold the online curriculum. So there's a lot of flexibility in how districts use these funds, but we know many of our students still don't have internet access at their homes, and so many districts still purchase the actual hard textbook.
So this is an extraordinary historic moment where the actual request for instructional materials that tied to the cost was actually funded, and that's extraordinary. So thank you very much.
Okay.
As you can see, we don't ever want to go back to that.
Yeah.
Kind of the Big Dipper. But that's awesome.
Next is the flexible benefit allowance, or our educator and support staff health insurance. Surprisingly, probably to some, this is flat. It's actually due to the fact that we did not have a premium rate increase last year. And so we always budget for a rate increase, because typically there is one, and it ranges from very small to quite large, it can anyway. And we typically budget for some staff growth, which we also did not have in the wake of a pandemic. So therefore, we have some carryover that we're able to put toward this amount, and fortunately that made up the additional that we think we might need next year. So I think this really helps us have received some of the other things that we were able to get in this budget. So want to be sure and let folks know that this doesn't mean that there will be any shortage in healthcare funding. So we expect this obligation to be fully covered.
And this covers the individual's healthcare insurance for 88,000 Oklahoma educators.
And that's required by law to fund this, right?
That's right. Obviously, though, it's an increasing burden for the legislature, as you can see, as health insurance costs have continued to rise. Okay, next is our support of students and teachers line item, really more formally known as the public school activities line item. So if you'll either flip your page over or turn your page up, this is the busier spreadsheet, and that's where we'll be focusing the rest of the presentation. We are also excited to see a small increase here in this line item. Is something that we've been advocating for some time now. So an increase of $8 million to this line item. So within this item, we'll just really briefly walk through the programs that come out of this item and where the funding stands, and then would be happy to dig in deeper to any of these as you have questions. So the Reading Sufficiency Act, of course, which has already been discussed today, received an increase of $1 million. So this is back to the $12 million total that the legislature reached, it was 2 years ago. Had to have a small decrease last year in the pandemic, but fortunately those funds have been restored. Similarly, alternative education has received an increase of $2 million, which also restores cuts that we endured last year. And then lastly here, funding was restored for the Oklahoma Arts Institute and was actually restored at a higher amount than where they were at pre-pandemic. So we're excited for that line item to receive this $320,000 which helps pay for scholarships for students to do the arts program down at Quartz Mountain.
And just to Mr. Flanagan, your point about, are we seeing improvement? Are we seeing that kind of reading success? There are things that have to come into position in order for them to be really effective in gaining traction. And the Reading Sufficiency Act was funded at the level originally designed, where it was really, wasn't like that a $6 million increase in 1 year to get to that 12 million, I think 2 years ago.
I think so, yeah.
And so that's targeted support to the children who have scored that at-risk area, and it connects them with that support financially. And so when we start to see that financial support, which can allow for a reading specialist potentially, if there is a concentration of need in a given school, it can mean also then the addition of what we're discussing earlier about the 10,000 teachers being trained in the science of reading. You begin to see that you're going to see gains, and that's part of the story I just wanted to highlight.
Okay. Moving along to the next items that also received an increase. Street School, I'm sorry, I meant to be telling you the lines on these. This is line 10 on your spreadsheet. Received an increase of $80,000, which puts them back at $180,000, restoring again prior cuts from pre-pandemic. So we're excited for them to receive that funding restored. The teacher induction program, which is line 18 on your spreadsheet, increased, went from zero actually to $375,000. This is the line item that we use to support first-year teachers. We have approximately 3,000 first-year teachers every year in the state, and this provides training for the mentor program that is required in statute. Lastly,
was that one? I know originally it looked like it was 150. Can you talk about, I guess, what more support are you going to be able to provide with, that pretty significant increase? And I mean, obviously last year it was zero, so from that it's significant, but even from 150 it's significant.
So in state statute, every first-year teacher is required to have a mentor, and our funds are primarily used for training for those mentors. I'll walk on eggshells here, but $150,000 doesn't do a whole lot to train 3,000 mentors. So we're excited for this nearly double, which will help increase our capacity to support them and the first year teachers that they're working with.
Does any of this go to? I know there's the extra class that emergency certified teachers have to do on reading specifically. Is that a separate item, or is that included there?
I don't think that I might have to phone a friend.
Robin says separate?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a separate item.
Okay.
Thanks, Robin. Lastly here, teacher and leader effectiveness programs saw an increase of $125,000. So again, a doubling. This program we use to fund supports for, we have a principal academy, an aspiring superintendent academy, and a superintendent cohort. And so all of these are seeking to train effective leaders in our schools to help support teachers and change climate and real world problem solving in their schools. So we are excited to see a boost in that program, which will help hopefully expand the number of individuals who can enroll in those programs. Next, we had a couple of items that funding was increased because we had required an increase in or a need to meet our obligation for these items. So the first is for our required assessments, which is back up on line 5. So an additional $4 million for a total of 8.2. You might remember that when we did not have state assessments in 2020 because of COVID, that money was carried over into last year, which allowed that baseline to be reduced significantly. That has been depleted now, so the baseline needs to be built back up. So this is not an expansion of testing or an expansion of the cost of testing. It's simply restoring that baseline that was needed to fulfill that requirement.
Carolyn, on that one, and I asked you this earlier, but just to clarify, that will that budget line ensures that every high school student will be able to take whichever ultimately, I think we dealt with this last meeting, but whichever test, ACT or SAT, ends up being the state test, it will ensure that every student gets to take that test, right?
Correct. So this funding, in combination with, is nearly $5 million in federal funding, is what is used for to meet our state testing requirements. So that is the required assessments in grades 3 through 8, and then the required high school assessment, which of course we have used a college and career readiness assessment in the past, either the ACT or SAT, and you're correct. The last board meeting, you all reviewed those proposals, and I don't know that the awardee has been notified, so I won't disclose that. But yes, these funds will be used to fulfill that obligation.
And we are also going to be using some of our federal dollars that came as the relief dollars to provide this fall an opportunity for other students, even those that are in 10th, 11th, and 12th, to take the ACT or SAT in the fall. So that will give them new opportunities. We know that those students that take this more often than just once, their junior year, actually score higher. And so we want them to have every opportunity for scholarships that they would be eligible for. And having that early opportunity is something that we wanted to provide that support since it was taken away last spring.
Yeah, because I assume there were a bunch of students, obviously those who needed to do it, but there were probably 10th graders, 11th graders who chose not to take it during the spring, where they otherwise would.
And I should also mention, we did this spring offer to all the seniors who did miss that their junior year an opportunity to take that again. And for some, it was the first time.
Okay. Next, the second item on this slide is the teacher's retirement credit. This is a 100% pass-through that goes to teacher's retirement. This is a credit toward what the employee owes for their retirement and is a statutory requirement that the legislature fulfill. So as we see the number of teachers go up, then this credit goes up because it is based on active teachers in the classroom. And so so I know it's a burden for the legislature, but we're glad to see it goes up because that means there's more teachers. So so that's why the increase here on this line item. And then lastly, here, which is actually line 14, the psychologist, speech pathologist, audiologist bonus. Again, this was an item that we had some carryover in prior, still do have a little bit of carryover in, but we did need a small increase to ensure that we can meet the obligation for those speech paths. So we expect this increase, which is a total of $3.3 million, plus we have some remaining funds from last year. We did actually see a dip in speech paths in our schools during COVID. So we're hoping that those will be returning. So we expect to fully fund that $5,000 bonus with these funds for next year. That's awesome. Okay, lastly, and I'll just run through these fairly quickly, but funding was maintained for these programs or met the need for these programs. So Sooner Start, which is line 1 in your budget, of course, is our program for students or children that have developmental disabilities. They're age 0 to 3. Is an in-home visitation program, a partnership that we have with the health department to help support those families and working with their students early on before they enter the school system. The Early Childhood Initiative remained flat at $12 million. This is line 2. Of course, this is a 4-year-old program that has a, I believe it's a 3-time match to the state investment. So we're really getting a lot of bang for our buck in this investment. The school lunch match is $3.5 million. This allows us to draw down hundreds of millions of dollars for the school lunch program. I believe we served more than 110 million lunches last year. I think it's in the book. But for $3.5 million, that minimal investment, we're able to make sure that our students have access to those meals. AP teacher training and test fee assistance remain flat at $1 million. This supports the required professional development for teachers, AP teachers, and provides test fee assistance to low-income students. We have Imagine Math, which is, of course, a math program that has been made available to all of our schools. That program remained flat at $1 million. Ag in the Classroom also remained flat at $38,000, which is, of course, the program out of the Department of Ag that teaches students about the importance of agriculture. The Secure Schools program is the Rave Panic Button. This amount remained flat at $2.35 million to continue supporting those schools that are implementing that panic button. Teach for America, which is, I think was mentioned earlier today, and that funding has remained flat at $2 million. And then lastly, the National Board Certified Teacher Bonus. This did have a small decrease to $1.5 million. That is based on an estimate of the number of teachers that will be in the program. You all may remember that this is the bonus structure for the NBCT program is slowly being phased out. And so as it is phased out and teachers roll off of the bonus structure onto the additional amount that they get on the salary schedule, which is funded by districts, this line item continues to decrease. I think in another year or two, that'll be the end of the bonus that it was phased out over a 10-year period. We're getting close to that 10-year expiration.
And I just have to say that is a fabulous program. And many of our teachers that go through the National Board Certified Teacher Program say it is has the most profound professional impact for their own careers, but also then an impact directly to their students. And we are in great support of seeing more and more of our teachers have this pursuit. And of course, we want to see the opportunity to encourage our districts to continue to promote that.
I apologize, I feel like that was a little fast and furious, but hopefully it was helpful, and I'd be happy to answer any remaining questions that you might have.
I've held a few for you.
Okay.
Carolyn, what actually triggers the consolidation assistance? What's the action that creates that money to go out? I probably should know that, but I
No. Most likely, or most frequently, I should say, two or more districts have decided on their own to consolidate or annex. And we have a few of those typically happen every year for a variety of reasons, and they initiate that. There are votes that have to be taken of their electorate and things of that nature. And then the district would apply to the state board for support. So I don't know if you have seen one of those applications. We
have, now that you say that.
Yeah, the employee severance, that's the word I'm looking for. And so when you are approving severance payments because of a consolidation or annexation, that fund is where those come from.
And they can use it for like joint payment to a superintendent if they are sharing a superintendent.
That's correct. And we do frequently see that a shared superintendent often is a first step toward consolidation. So there are a couple of districts that come together and a shared superintendent, they find that, there's really no need for, these other kind of duplicative services, and they can consolidate or annex. And so frequently that is a first step, not always, but often we see that as kind of a leading step to consolidation or annexation.
The grade expectations was zero now. What was the reason for that?
It was. So I believe we've shared this publicly. We're intending to do a competitive grant application for various vendors across the state using our federal relief funds. And in discussion with legislators, we think Great Expectations might actually be able to receive more than what they had been receiving, $400,000. They used to receive, I think, nearly $2 million a number of years ago from the state budget. So we're hoping that they might have a better chance of getting a larger amount going that pathway than this pathway. So we're hopeful and optimistic that they'll still continue to be able to support their schools and expand.
I just want to say, and maybe it leads to a question, I'm super excited and really appreciate that the department's bringing back the competitive grant pool. You know, that's something that the board used to be involved in. And I think it's evidence-based. It was, you know, vendors had to come and prove that their you know, programs worked. And I'm just glad that it's coming back.
We're excited as well. Of course, you know, it's been something that's been requested in our budget for a number of years that has gone unmet for a variety of reasons, but really helps districts with the cost of some of these innovative programs, or maybe helps them try a program that maybe they couldn't afford on their own. So that's really the goal, is to get some exposure to districts, allow them to pick and choose what fits best with their community and with their needs, and then be able to have that access at a lower cost.
And the question to that is, at some point, will we have kind of a similar, as the department's deciding how those federal funds are going to be spent, you know, kind of a presentation of outlining what all the dollars are being spent on?
I think that's a good suggestion. I'm sure we'd be happy to do that. That's great.
Yeah, and I believe, I want to be careful on an accurate, looking for someone who might be able to, I don't see Tiffany in front of friend there, but the date on when the release for the application,
I think I actually asked her earlier.
Yeah.
I think she's hoping it'll go out by next week.
That's what I was thinking.
Because the goal is to have those programs made available by the start of the school year.
Do you know how much you're putting into the pool?
10 million, as at a minimum.
Exciting.
Mr. Rebecca, did you have
I have a couple more.
You said you had a few, so let's
I
give
did.
it back to you.
I'll try to be patient and polite here. Okay, street school. What is the street school?
Superintendent, I might let you take this one because I know it's a passion for you.
Yeah, right.
We'll totally dig it. So street school is one of the original, long time back, I think it was in the 70s, alternative education schools. And so it is a partner with Tulsa Public Schools. Yet they are a standalone. So it's kind of a hybrid of, you have to apply to get in, and it is a lot of wraparound services that go with it. They have on-staff psychologists. Actually, it might be a psychiatrist that was a former student many, many years ago. And it is an extraordinary
Sounds
impactful.
great.
Yeah.
Does it target homeless youth?
No, not necessarily, but it could be. And there are students at risk. Most have already either dropped out and are coming back, and the application process and the interview, it's a, I think there's like, you could share more information. That's probably a lot about how, would you want to?
Oh no, it's just a phenomenal program. I mean, they do a lot of work showcasing the benefit of the programs, allowing for students to come back and speak, wraparound supports for kids. So it's very well known for its impact in the Tulsa community.
And Mr. Flanagan, have you visited the street?
Yes. Okay, Carolyn, can I ask you a question? Okay, on the street schools, they get the $180,000. Do they get any additional money from the Department of Ed?
No.
They do not, but they do some fundraising.
They do
some private
They do
fundraising.
fundraising. They do annual
Fundraising like a
events.
private
Yeah.
school would.
Okay, I made a little mistake, but I'll have to deal with that next year.
Well, we like how that sounds. So the support of students, it really just means that they're able to support more students. There is, at one point, gosh, I'm not gonna get this accurate, but just think about this as ballpark figures. Something like, just 150 students or somewhere in there, but 300 on the waiting list. So we're talking about a really phenomenal program that is truly a model that many seek to emulate.
It saves kids, because when I worked at Union, I worked with them. It's an amazing program. It keeps kids focused. I had to say that because it's wonderful.
I'll go visit.
It's very, yeah. Oh, yeah, they love, and on Thanksgiving, you can be a part of
Helping
giving out
serve.
and helping and serving there, because that's a big annual event, so.
So Joey, I've got two more questions.
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for answering that though. You teach the counselors, you'd asked for money, we approved that, and much needed. And now that we've gotten this wonderful budget, where on here is the new counselor piece we asked for? Where am I not seeing that or not following that?
Sure, good, great question. So that was not funded through the state ask, but that was able to be funded through the federal relief dollars. It is directly the kind of program that those federal relief dollars were intended to provide. So that's a $35 million grant we announced. As I mentioned, that application opened, I think about 2 weeks ago, somewhere right in there, and we turned that around and we expect to be able to make that announcement probably next week.
Great news. And my last question was in regards to instructional media. I believe it was you were told early on. Can districts use those kinds of funds, Joy, for anything they feel, any type of curriculum they feel would be beneficial to the students, or is it restricted to just a certain type of curriculum?
So that's a textbook funds
They
that
can
we refer to in.
Sure, they can purchase any of the approved subject matters. So for example, if they already have sufficient science materials, they could purchase, I don't remember what the year before was, but our textbooks are under contract for 6 years. The vendors are under contract for 6 years. So some of those funds may go toward continuing the purchase of those books that are still under contract. But we know that science is an area where many districts have foregone purchasing those materials in the past for a variety of reasons. So we would expect that many will be using those funds for science. Also, just maybe a note, I think you all have done some of this, but if a district wishes to use these funds for something other than textbooks, then they have to come to this board and explain how they have they have to verify that they essentially have materials that already meet the standards and why they're requesting to use them for something. So you guys have seen some of those in the past.
Like if they bond for textbooks.
Correct. Frequently, district will put textbooks in a bond and then they want to use this money for something else.
Good.
Very good. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you again to the financial team at the House and Senate, and also our legislators who are here with us again. We thank them. All right, then. Thank you, Carolyn. Item number 11, we're actually going to table and move on to item 12, which is an update and discussion from Sovereign Community School. Do we have with us?
I believe Stacey.
They're out in the hallway. They've been waiting out there.
Oh, okay, let's bring them in. Thank you. All right.
So we have Kyla and Stacey.
Kyla. So, please just go to the podium here.
Well, good afternoon, Superintendent Hoffmeister, board members, and Brad Clark. We're very excited to be here today. I was going to say good morning, but we passed that threshold now, so thank you for allowing us to be here. I don't have a ton to say today because it's my great pleasure to introduce to you our new superintendent that's going to be providing this presentation to you and going to be informing you of all the changes that have happened and all the plans that we continue to improve on and move forward.
Very good. Please introduce us.
So, who we have today is we have Dr. Donald Dusty Delso, so he prefers Dusty, and we're very excited that he's here today to kind of tell you what we're going to do moving forward and how we present to, or how we are going to continue to achieve and move forward at Sovereign Community Schools.
Very good. Thank you.
So I'll turn it over to him.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Does everyone have a copy of the presentation? I've got some copies here if you would like.
Sure.
Would that help?
Yeah.
I'll hand it out to you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you for having me. I come to you by way of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. I'm a 25-plus year veteran of public education, and I have an earned doctorate in effective teaching practice from the University of Tulsa. I have stops at Union, Jinx, Broken Arrow, and the Cherokee Nation, and I just love Sovereign. It's a wonderful place, and I think there's some things we can do. If you look at the first page, the staff overview, we currently have 5 full-time teaching staff, 2 full-time administrators, 1 bus driver, and a maintenance person. We are looking for a part-time teacher, and then 2 part-time aides. We have filled 1 of those positions, but we need 1 more. On the next page, this is our curriculum overview. This is my specialty. We will run very close to the Class B school, a small school like Schulter, like Red Oak. Until we get enough enrollment, we will put 5 and 6 together, teach them together, and 7th and 8th grade together. And then we run an 8-period day that's parallel. Everybody takes math, everybody takes a science, all the way through high school. So at the end, all of our students are college preparatory ready. They are 4x4 ready, no questions. We run the regular State Department curriculum, and then we do our indigenous curriculum, which we call the sovereign curriculum. So we try to do both those things, but we want to make absolutely sure that our students have met all of the requirements of the state of Oklahoma. And we feel like it's better. I've done this at Sequoia Tahlequah. I was there for 6 years. It's best to teach them separately. Teach the regular curriculum, then do your indigenous curriculum. And it seems to work well with your students. The curriculum overview for 9th, 10th, and 11th. Everybody will take the same formats. We don't offer a palette or a buffet style. Everybody takes algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and then their senior year, they'll take trigonometry and statistics. Everybody in science, they take biology, physical science, anatomy, and then their last one would be chemistry. So that's the format that we'll use. Our budget update. I would like to thank Stacy Thrasher very much for her efforts. That number is black. That number was not black last year, ladies and gentlemen, but it is this year, and it is 6 figures. That's a very major accomplishment because we didn't have all of our title funding because for some reason it wasn't applied for. And I can assure you we'll apply for all of those this year. Our carryover is going to be right at $100,000. Enrollment update. All of our projections and budgets are based on a student count of 150. Our current enrollment as of yesterday afternoon is 147. So we're on target. We want a 25 student pad. So our goal is to get to 175 that way with attrition, because you always have some that don't come back. We'll meet our budgets. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. In summary, I came in, I've been there 3 weeks. I love the place. Please come and visit us. It's got kind of a summer camp feel, but it's great. Number 1, we want to stabilize our budget. The second is get our enrollment to 150 by October 1st. Solidify and get a foundational curriculum. Hire staff to teach that, and we want them all to be certified whenever possible. And we're on track to do that. And then give clear job responsibilities so we do not miss things like applying for title funds. Everybody needs to clearly know what your responsibilities are. We'll do that. Complete all of our funding source applications on time. That's just due diligence, and that's our responsibility. And then what do we have? One more page. And then a careful review of our standardized achievement test scores. I would like to get those to you sometime in the fall, so we show where we're at, what we're doing, and our progress. I am also working with the Public School Resource Center. I want them to assign me a mentor that they feel is a good person, because my background is public school, and there are a few things in the charter school system that I need to become aware of, and someone who's experienced and been through that can help me through. And I've met with them, good people. But if you have any questions, that's the end of my presentation.
I have a question on, originally when Sovereign applied to us, and with most charter schools, fundraising is a decent part of the obligation and, kind of the expectation of the superintendent and the board and others. Have you yet, I know you're only 3 weeks in, one of the things, there's always been hope that some of Oklahoma's tribes would contribute to Sovereign from a fundraising standpoint. Is that something that's on your radar?
One of the things that we want to do is all of the students from their tribes, we have their tribal affiliations. We would like to write a letter to each one of them saying, we have this number of students from your tribe. If possible, could you contribute and help lead towards their funding? Do that. The other big one is, while I was at Sequoia Tahlequah, a man named Tony Dearman, I hired him as his first administrative position. He is now the director of the Bureau of Indian Education in Washington, D.C. He's given me 3 or 4 names to talk to in tribes that tend to do that. So he's one of my dearest friends. We had competitive baseball teams. We won national titles with him. His son's quite a player, and my son played professionally. So it's nice to be able to pick the phone up and he says, you need to talk to Mr. Coyne and from here, and one of them's in California. But that's going to be good. So yes, ma'am, we are doing those things. We're trying to seek funding in addition to our state funding. We want to do things with tribes and other national governments. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I can add to that too. Next week, we do have a meeting with the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe at their tribal headquarters, as well as we're submitting a grant this weekend for a language preservation program to hopefully be able to help funding for our students to continue to learn their language.
Great. Follow up to that, I'd love to hear the follow up on the grant I think you mentioned last time that you all had applied for and where that landed. But secondly, the carryover amount that's left, does that cover your payroll expenses for the summer when you don't have state aid?
Yes, it does.
Yes.
So we applied for the resiliency grant. It had over, I think, 10,000 applicants. We did not receive it at this time, so we will continue to apply and resubmit that. And then, so the carryover amount, our teachers have actually already been paid through the summer. So that would be within our June budget and not included in the carryover. So our carryover is set and we're good to move forward.
I had a chance to meet Jackie Joy, who's still in here, connected her with the school a couple of weeks ago, and it turns out she and you go by Dr. D? Is that what they say? Dr. D. It turns out you all know each other, so I think that's pretty cool.
Her brother, Benny Dixon, and I are dear friends, and I had no idea that Jackie ran your Indian Ed programs, but we go way back. And if you're a Dixon and you are from Chakotah or Haskell, you know all of them. And I know all of them very well. So yes,
Next Tuesday, if everyone.
yes, next Tuesday we're going to get together and see what I need to be doing. So I will follow her guidance very closely.
I don't have a question necessarily, but I just want to say I appreciate, one of the things, the feedback that we've given and kind of in the past, I think that was a problem for Sovereign is the school leaders did not have typical superintendent experience running a school, and that's where some of the problems have really come in my opinion. So I'm really excited to see you with, significant experience running schools up here before us. So
Thanks.
I'm excited to see what you'll do.
I plan to spend 10 years there. And all indications so far, that's good. The staff's very, very receptive, and we're putting in structure. It's nice. It's nice.
Very good.
I would echo that, and thank you for all the hard work you all have done. And I was just gonna recommend, I know we've had them reporting monthly, but I would think at this point, start doing it quarterly or whatever. I think we're well past that. That would be my suggestion to the board, so.
Sounds like a good thing to consider. Let's see if,
There's no action item.
Right.
Okay, very good.
yeah, but that's just an invitation, so we can just consider that. And but I think that sounds very reasonable, of course. Very good.
Thank you, sir.
So very nice to get to meet you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's nice to see you in person.
Yes, finally.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, item 12B, board members.
That felt good.
Okay, that was fun.
Board members, so at this point in the afternoon, I guess, would ask and recommend that we convene an executive session to get forward identified on the agenda, discuss the possible action relating to surveillance form.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bradford.
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Munnins.
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffmeister.
Aye. All right, then we will move into executive session, and then we will have two more items to consider outside of executive session, all related to Western Heights after we return from executive session. All right, and we know it's the lunch hour, and it would be a safe bet that you should, it'll be a lot. Feel free to get lunch. Okay. All right, so we will ask our legal counsel needs to stay, and we'll ask then everyone else to allow us to go into executive session. Right. Motion and second, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bradford.
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Munnins.
Aye.
Superintendent.
Aye. All right, we are back in from executive session, and just for the record, we did not make any votes or decisions during executive session. So now at this time, here's my agenda. I would ask the board if there is a motion related to item number 12B, discussion and possible action. Let's see. To issue an emergency order summarily suspending the educator certificate, which is in this case a superintendent certificate for pre-K through 12, and the certificate number of Mannix Farms pending individual proceeding for revocation and other action.
So moved.
Second. All right, motion and a second. Any discussion or questions? All right, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bradford.
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Munnins.
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffmeister.
Aye. All right, that motion carries. Now, Mr. Clark, would you please update the board and give us a review with possible action to consider on item 12C?
Sure. Superintendent, honorable members of the board, I think earlier Carolyn might have had the soundbite of the day, the medical marijuana. But stay tuned. We'll give you the update on where we are with Western Heights Public Schools. We're going to talk about the past a little bit, and also where, in recent past anyway, this board, this body took action in April, put the district on probation. And those conditions, kind of where we are at this point. And so just initially, well, hang with me for a moment, an overview of what the district looks like. Representative, location, how many sites, how many students. And so there are 9 school sites in Western Heights. one high school, the enrollment, if you look at it, 2020 was about 3,400 students, and then suffered a significant decline in 2021. There were 3,400, roughly 2,600 at that point in 2021. Demographics, just so you get an idea of the district, the student in the district. 90% or more of the students in the district are free and reduced lunch or economically disadvantaged. 35% of the students are English learners, 46% Hispanic, 16% Black, and 23% white. These are approximate. So I said in April, this body put Western Heights Public Schools on probation. And just a quick refresh what those reasons, what the basis was for that adjustment to the accreditation status. 2 years in a row, there were negative audits in the district. Consecutive years, findings, management letter, recommendations, not being able to reconcile bank statements, information not aligning, 2 years in a row. The academics and student outcomes were not good. To be polite, to be candid, they're worse now. Federal programs, 2 years in a row, the district was determined to be non-compliant with the requirements of the federal programs monitoring reports. And year one was the audit cycle, monitoring cycle. Year two, because the district had a prior year non-compliance determination, they were subject to a risk assessment and then scored high on that as well, leading to the year two. So non-compliant 2 years in a row. The basis for the second year was not providing information to the department in a timely manner. As we will go through, not providing information is something that is not a first-time occurrence here. It's a pattern. We want to see a lot of patterns develop when we go through this information. The emergency relief money, as I mentioned in April, we were on Zoom at that point, so we'll be back. We were not seeing the emergency relief money going to exactly what it was budgeted for. It was just unsupported. So they were budgeting for Chromebooks, and the federal programs report has staff reporting, the administration reporting that they were using these funds to give students one-to-one technology or virtual learning. And we've had 3 claims that have been submitted throughout 2020 on the federal relief money. And it does not align with what was represented. I'm not saying it didn't happen, it just does not align with the evidence we have. I mentioned the federal programs non-compliance. We saw the same thing with students with disabilities. They were determined to be tier 3, so they've taken corrective actions, but 2 years in a row. It's another pattern, 2 years in a row on each of these. You see 2 years in a row, and there's a common denominator at the end of that 2-year period as well. Personnel, we saw a significant, more than a significant reduction in staff. We'll see in a moment it was about 37% in 2 years. 37% of the staff, certified and support staff combined, 37% lost in 2 years. And it's not getting better. And then just to summarize, there's an unstable environment going on in Western Heights Public Schools. For students, for staff, for families, it has to be turned around. There is I said this word in April, I believe, disharmony in that school district community. And it must be turned around. The district was given an opportunity through this board's determination in April to put them on probation. That was an opportunity to take corrective action and, of course, correct these issues that we've seen over the last 2 years. That has not happened yet. Say yet. There's another opportunity. Opportunity remains, right? But that 90-day period that this body set in April comes July 8th. So here we are today. Diving deeper, historically, what we presented in April, the academic achievement in Western Heights Public Schools, I believe this is 2019, reflective of 1% of the students advanced, 53% of the students were below basic at that time. Absenteeism, one of the highest chronic absenteeism rates in the state of Oklahoma, occurs in Western Heights. About 15 percentage points below the state average. Post-secondary opportunities, you see the state going up, the district's trajectory is going down. The gap is widening for opportunities for children. And then at the bottom, 6 of the 9 sites, right? We have 9 sites. 6 of those sites are federally designated as in need of support and improvement. What are those designations? Well, the first one site is what we refer to as CSI, that's Comprehensive Support and Improvement. That means that that school site is in the bottom 5% of all schools in the state of Oklahoma. And then the other 5 referred to as ATSI, it's Additional Targeted Support and Improvement. And that's when you look at a subgroup, one or more subgroups. And there's the graph that's on the school report card for the absenteeism. You see it's about 15 to 16 percentage points lower.
So the blue is the district, if you can't see that, and the black line bar represents the state average.
And then post-secondary opportunities for students in the district. Again, you see the state going up, the district going down. Now these are preliminary, I have to say that. The last slide was what we saw in April, and we've had state assessments in the interim. These are preliminary data, preliminary results, not final, but we're here today to present you with what it looks like is going to be, and it's getting worse.
So what you're looking at is a distribution of all schools. Each column represents a group of schools that received that particular score on that indicator, or that particular distribution of performance. And the yellow arrow represents the far lower end and where Western Heights is performing after really being out of that physical contact together, which we know was a challenge for a lot of school districts. And everyone is working very hard to connect and serve students. We know within the Western Heights teaching support group of teachers and those who are supporting students. But it represents academically high need and an academic fragility, if you will, for the kind of support that is needed to help our students get what they need in this particular school year.
And just an observation, recall in April, we were talking about Western Heights not returning to in-person services for students, right? They were the last one in the state to do so. Perhaps it's no surprise, use that word, fragility. Perhaps it's no surprise that we're seeing that also worsen.
And I hope that this also helps create a sense of urgency on why this is so important that there be a real change, a real turnaround, and support and stability for the community and students, and all those who stand ready to serve students.
I'm sorry, Jeremy, I'm locked up over here.
I'm sorry, camera. Let me get that.
Perfect. So school personnel, I mentioned this on the opening or second slide, that 37% loss in staff, right? Over 2 years. So in fiscal year 2020, the district reported to us 494 certified and support personnel. In FY21, that number was down to 310. Just to update you, June 14th, 2021, the district had a board meeting at which they took up 21 resignations and only hired one new person at that time. It's a net loss of 20. And so the department reached out to the district and asked for an updated personnel report, a current report. And I can tell you that they have submitted it just a day or two ago. Right now, it looks like they have 293, that total, 494, 310, 293, with a representation that they intend at some point to hire 42 more. It's still significantly low. We also have numerous, not one radical parent complaining. We have numerous complaints that are coming about the environment, the culture at Western Heights Public Schools. Claims of retaliation and harassment is another pattern that we will see in a moment. And then it is also pretty striking in my mind, of all of the school districts in the state that collectively bargain, Western Heights is the only district that has not reached an agreement with their teachers for employment contracts 2 years in a row. Remember that theme, 2 years? Here it is again, it continues.
And you state for others, what's the significance of that 2 years?
Mr. Mannix Barnes became hired by the school district 2 years ago. So I mentioned the audit, and we'll talk about finances at length here in a moment. The 2019 audit, you can read it, it's on the website from the April board meeting, it's on the state auditor's website. It very clearly says there was a violation of that Title 62 statute. What was the violation? Using bond proceed money to pay off earlier bond debt. It's a violation of that statute. In 2020, we start out with a lengthy list of findings about the accounting firm was not able to reconcile with the accounts. And we're going to see that pattern develop again. Examples of where they were not able to reconcile are all of these items that you've seen, saw this in April. But take note of those. Those are not $3 off. In a moment, we'll get to an audit that's actually worse, dollar-wise, and not being able to reconcile. That list continues. 42% of the activity fund deposits were not timely made. It goes on and on across the areas in that audit. And so yesterday, I think last night, the board received a report from the district about actions that they have taken since April. One of those areas says, well, yeah, we have reduced staff because our state budget has been cut 42% in 2 years. That is false. The image here to the left shows the 2 years. So if you look at their overall, it's General Fund 11, which is the operational fund for a school district. That's actually gone up in 2 years. And this year, with the COVID-19 relief money, it has the allocation to the district for the 3 pools, tranches of money is about $17.7 million. So I don't think it makes common sense to anyone to see a statement that we've reduced staff by 37% or more, and that our budget has been cut by the State Department of Education 42%. It doesn't align. Let's talk about the federal relief money for a moment. Areas that these funds can be used for. So we have the CARES Act, and there was a second round called ESSER 2, and then more recently in March there was ESSER 3. With ESSER 3, there's a requirement that a district set aside 20% of all the money to address learning loss for students. Right, Carolyn? Also with ESSER 1 and 2, these same activities are available. Addressing learning loss among students, addressing mental health services and supports, all of these are available. All of the expenditures with these funds, whether it's ESSER 1, 2, or 3, have to be reasonable and necessary for the mission. And the mission is to prepare, respond to, and recover from COVID-19 and the impacts on schools and students. Go ahead.
No, one of those points is activities related to summer learning and supplemental after-school programs. We just heard a report, actually I heard it this morning, on the news that, an example of a school with serving a similar population of students with high need, Tulsa, had served in the past 5,000 students for summer school, this year 10,000. So that would be the kind of response we would expect to see, and that's not what we're seeing here.
I'll also mention two other things. The third point there, addressing the specific needs of low-income children or otherwise underserved students. Recall the demographics that we went through at the beginning. You would expect to see that with the use of these funds. Some demonstrable effort to utilize those funds for those efforts. We've also seen, I think I saw Oklahoma City Public Schools is using some of the relief money to incentivize teacher recruitment, to repair the teacher shortage, to retain teachers and staff. I'm not aware of any efforts going on in Western Heights to do that. Thank you. So what we saw with the representations from the district and their budgeting presented one situation, and then the three claims that have been submitted maybe tell a different picture or story. So again, $17.7 million provided under ESSER 1, 2, and 3 made it available to the school district. In the federal programs report we went through in April, the district reported that they used their ESSER 1 money to achieve one-to-one technology for all students. That's unsupported. It was that way in April and it remains that way today. I've actually looked at the claims and the invoices that were used with CARES money, ESSER 1. That does not appear anywhere in there. And so if you take the $17.7 million, $844,000 of that emergency money has been spent. At least as far as we can tell with claims that have been submitted to the department. Or maybe more, but as of right now, $844,000 of emergency money that can be used for summer school, after school programs, addressing learning loss, mental health supports. That's what we see. Of the $844,000, we did not see summer school being ramped up, additional opportunities for kids. We saw fund money, $278,000 in generators being purchased in case we have storms. That was one reason that was presented. Another reason could be we need to keep our servers going. That would be allowable. And they represented that. But we do not see any investments, strategic investments we are not seeing in those areas of learning loss, mental health, and staff recruitment.
Remember, these are students who have barriers with language, who have
economic disadvantage, which brings with it a lot of other struggles. And when we look back over 15 months, 10 days we're together inside a school. After this board said on April 1, they needed to open the school doors and bring people in because there had been plenty of time for teachers to be vaccinated. In fact, it was the teachers that contacted us saying, we want to be back together and reunite physically with all of our students. And that did not happen the way it happened in many other districts that were able to accomplish this.
All right, so let's shift from the finances for a moment, talk about the governance, the leadership at Western Heights. Historically, if you look at 2013, 2021, at the elections that have been held in that school district, there have been a total of 1,037 votes for school board candidates over 8 years. 49% of those votes occurred in this most recent elections. Quite startling. Shows you the real commitment and engagement from the voters in the district to make some change.
This really speaks to what we have been receiving, which is the evidence of disharmony in the community and a disregard for the voice of families and the community with respect to a listening school board.
And so let's go to 2019 for a moment. So that 2 years, that theme, that pattern. In April of 2019, Mannix Barnes, current superintendent of the district, was a board member in the district. In April, he submits an application to the State Department of Education to be qualified, certified as a school superintendent. That's April 29th. And then the current superintendent of Western Heights at that time announced his resignation on June 10th. Mr. Barnes is already in process getting in the queue to get that certificate to be eligible to be a superintendent. He was on the board, submits the application. The current superintendent resigns about 30 days, 45 days later, effective 30 or 45 days later. That superintendent had been there, I think it's 25 to 30 years. It's not a common pattern that we would see in schools for a superintendent to have been there 25, 30 years and step down effective 30 or 45 days later. But the timeline here shows that Mr. Barnes was in the pool, was in the queue to become that superintendent. And in fact, after he stepped down from the board on July 1, the school board president, Robert Everman, they vote to hire Mannix Barnes. And then this headline follows. July 2nd, 2019, headline, Western Heights School Board makes controversial decision to hire fellow member as new superintendent. In 2020, June of 2020, about governance. We saw in an open meeting, that was the board member consuming alcohol while transacting public business.
But as far as...
And then in 2021, in April, this body puts the school district on probation for all the reasons we've talked about. And what was the response? Was it to course correct? Was it to repair culture? Was it to engage in community meetings? All of those are no. This clip is actually an example of what transpired.
But as far as these few parents, there's a few out there that are radicals. I think every district has that, and it's usually the same old ones. They've been complaining since I've been here, and we kind of call them perennial complainers.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second. There are numerous parents reaching out to us, not just a few.
numerous. Our phones are ringing off the hook, our email is being inundated, and they're concerned because let me tell you why. They say that in the last year or since you've taken over, there has been a substantial decrease in staff, that there have been wrongful terminations, that there have been multiple teachers that were incredible teachers who have resigned. And not only that, but student enrollment has dropped significantly. So don't you want to listen to them? Don't you want to know what they have to say? Don't you have some kind of response, some kind of solution?
Right. And I do listen to them and I return calls as well.
So that was a response. We have, go back, sorry.
But as far as
we had State Board of Education put the school district on probation, adjusted their accreditation status to probation, giving an opportunity for the adults, the leaders of that school district, to course correct, to engage in meaningful repair among claims of harassment, retaliation, student enrollment decline, on and on and on. The response was, we have radical parents, number one, and number two, to file a lawsuit against the State Board of Education. We're giving you an opportunity to course correct. And so maybe it was no surprise, just 2 weeks ago, the board doubles down on that superintendent, says he's doing a great job. We're going to take an affirmative vote to keep that going. This wonderful thing that's happening, we're going to keep that going. It's so good.
When you say the board, you mean the Western Heights District Board?
Correct.
Brad, what was the vote? Do you know?
4-1. 4-1.
Sorry. Sorry.
4-1. So that was just 2 weeks ago. But let's look at some of the representations and see that pattern that is present now. And thankfully, given the last items, the action this board took, let's look at the representations. I'll save that for a moment. Representations made when the superintendent, Mr. Barnes, submitted his application, resume, all these documents are publicly available. Representations of competencies and skills, areas of finance, human relations, human resources, public relations, media affairs, contract negotiations, budget and planning, how to balance a checkbook, how to reconcile bank statements. These were the representations to get a certificate. By the way, omitted was the expulsion from the University of Oklahoma College of Tennessee. Public record. The candor was not there on that. I'm not saying it had to be, but it was not represented. Instead, what was represented was this acumen, expertise in human resources. One that you would not expect to see: retaliation, harassment, hostile work environment, not having successful negotiations with employees, as well as the financial expertise. One that you would not expect to see $32 million not being able to be verified. Audit findings, you would not expect to see that. And so, let's look at those prior experiences that have shaped where we are today. Public record, case citations, is there below. At the Oklahoma Department of Labor, I think it was 2007, you see two individuals working there who are now at the school district and have been really tied together for years. The chief of staff at the Department of Labor was Mannix Barnes. The chief financial officer was Robert Everman, that school board president that voted to hire Mannix Barnes in 2019. claims of harassment and retaliation at the Department of Labor. The lawsuit filed on a motion for summary judgment. This is in federal district court here in the Western District of Oklahoma. Judge Cochran issues an order that says, based on the claims that have been presented at this stage, a jury could find, based on the evidence that is presented, that it demonstrates that the defendants, Mr. Barnes, one of them named, acted intentionally to coerce a resignation. That pattern we're talking about, the claims that you're hearing from school staff, and parents, and the community, retaliation and harassment, it's right there. Shortly after that, this case was settled. So let's talk about finances for a moment. From the Department of Labor, or at the same time anyway, there's some overlap with peers. These two individuals go to the Lupus Foundation of Oklahoma. I think they started out both as board members. I believe Mr. Barnes steps off of the board and becomes the executive director. As of today.
And when you say these two individuals?
Mannix Barnes and Rob Everman. The last filing, last tax return to this organization was 2017. Since that point, there's been no activity filed with the federal government. As a result, the IRS has revoked that nonprofit status. The last 3 years of activity, when Mr. Barnes was the executive director, the accounts show a negative ending. You're in the red. Year 1, year 2, year 3, 15, 16, 17. And then there's no activity reported to the federal government. Interestingly, if you look at the Oklahoma Secretary of State's website today, you will find this organization, the Lupus Foundation of Oklahoma, with a registered agent, none other than Mannix Barnes. And the address for this registered agent is not at his home or residence, but it's at the Department of Labor, at a state of Oklahoma governmental agency. Moreover, when Mannix Barnes submitted for this certificate, Robert Everman writes a recommendation letter from the Lupus Foundation of Oklahoma and says Mannix Barnes is currently employed with the Lupus Foundation of Oklahoma. And one more, according to Facebook for the Lupus Foundation of Oklahoma, Robert Everman's wife is the president of that foundation. The pattern, one of them, is an incestuous culture that's ripe for demise of an organization. Financials, again, the two individuals, Mannix Barnes and Robert Everman, next go to Lucky Star Casinos. Mannix Barnes is the general manager of the 6 casinos and travel stops, and Robert Everman is the chief financial officer. There are complaints from employees of harassment and retaliation. And there's also an audit in 2016 that shows none other than we were unable, this is the accounting firm, we were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to provide a basis for an audit opinion. They could not issue an audit opinion, and why not? Because $314,000 or more, the accounts could not be reconciled for. And $32 million was unable, the documentation was unable to be obtained to verify the fund balances. That's under the leadership of the GM and the chief financial officer, who are now controlling Western Heights Public Schools.
So currently, right now, at this moment, Robert Everman is the president of the school board for Western Heights.
That's correct.
Okay. And up until your vote, just a moment ago, the certified superintendent was Mannix Barnes.
And so when we talked earlier about that 2-year period, July 1, 2019, when Mannix Barnes was hired, he has 0 years of experience in an Oklahoma public school. And he just received his superintendent's certificate. But he's hired on a contract, thanks to his longtime friend on the board, right, in part, Robert Everman. And so, pursuant to their duties under Oklahoma law, to fix the compensation of the superintendent, they carry that out by awarding a contract that is by far the most sought after contract and open records request that we have. And why is that? Well, just look at the details. He's brought in no years of experience and given a $220,000 base salary. 20 days of unpaid leave. He takes reasonable time off for personal growth. He gets his semester hours paid for. 25 of those a semester. 40 vacation days a year. He gets to hang out at the Chamber of Commerce and other civic community clubs. 20 sick days, 20 personal days. All adds up to over 100 days of leave per year.
Paid leave.
Paid leave, thank you. And a base salary of $220,000. And a retention bonus of $75,000.
Is that the fifth highest in the state?
It is, yeah. Fifth highest in the state. And that was just renewed.
Like 10 days ago.
Right,
It was on.
right at that June 14th meeting.
Yeah.
That 75,000, is that be paid on year 22?
It is. I have an understanding that they paid incrementally.
It's $25,000 a year plus the $75,000 at the third year. So he gets $150,000 for staying.
So here's the contract. Over 100 days of paid leave with no experience in the fifth highest.
How many school days? How many days do they go? Do you know?
Good question. I
Yeah, that's a great
do
question.
not know right now.
Instructional days.
See if we can get that.
And then the final is the image of the contract signature. Robert Everman, Board President, Mannix Barnes, thank you very much. I'm now the superintendent. So what are these patterns? Culture from the Department of Labor, retaliation, harassment, claims. They continue at Lucky Star casinos and now, most unfortunately, carried on to Western Heights Public Schools. Financial mismanagement, the Lucas Foundation, again, carried over to the school district. And I said that incestuous relationship that's ripe for demise of a culture within an organization, not the organization itself. And then the disregard for the physical, mental well-being, health, safety, welfare of individuals. That last point, just want to take a moment to go through this. On February 21st, at Western Heights High School, the sprinkler system, fire prevention, safety, protecting people in that building did not work. So if there was a fire, there's no sprinklers that could be activated. They knew about this on February 21st. On April 27th, you see the notice of violation. The Oklahoma City Fire Department issues this violation of city code. sprinkler systems in the high school were not working. Cannot have students and staff in the building. We know with certainty that there were people in the building during this time period. And not just students and staff of Western Heights. There was an event planned, it was April 10th at the University of Oklahoma, to bring people in to the high school. They knew about it February 21st and did not fix it. And they had $17.5 million at least available for these federal relief dollars that could have been utilized to repair and improve the physical building. That is a total disregard for the safety of people that you are not only to lead, but protect.
And they knew. It wasn't as if there was an awareness later. They knew and did not act on that.
So in a moment, we can listen to the conversation that occurred on April 27th. But representative of that conversation is a question from the fire department. Well, who's making these decisions to not fix and to fix this? And the response is, well, the facilities manager, but Mannix Barnes is the superintendent, and ultimately, so he is really going to make the final decision. And the 2 different points, the fire department, they say, we just need to close the school. Or this is something that you can be put in cuffs for and taken to county.
So who is it that we're going to be hearing?
This is the conversation that occurred on April 27th between the school district and the fire department. Jeremy, are you able to click on it?
People in this building without a working sprinkler system, period. I don't care about insurance, may not cover anything else. I care about the safety of the kids and the people in this building, and right now that's not happening.
I'll call them right now and try to get somebody out here.
Okay, so apparently this is, what day did those break?
February the 21st.
February 21st, and you haven't been able to get anybody out here since February 21st?
No, sir, I haven't tried because we didn't have kids in the building, and I'm trying to get insurance money and a lot of stuff. I understand what you're telling me.
Okay, well, no, you're not stuck. It is illegal to have a non-working sprinkler system, period, at all, even without people here.
I didn't know that. But
okay.
I'll call somebody right now.
Okay.
You want me to call you back?
No.
Or let you know, or what do you want me to do?
Well, I'll be in touch with your principal, figure out what's going on, and she can relay or then get you my information. I'm gonna have to go talk to my boss and see what he wants to do, and see what the affected areas are and how many people we have. Because right now I want to move them out of the affected areas into sprinkler areas.
I'll get on the phone right now.
Okay, I'll have your principal call you here in a little bit, and I'll get your information from her.
Okay, all right.
Bye.
All right.
So we need to move any students that are in affected areas of a non-sprinkler system need to be in a sprinkler area, or we need to just go ahead and close the school.
Could you please tell us what areas the affected areas are? Yes, please.
You want to walk us down there, or what?
Well, there's 3 riser rooms. I took pictures.
Do you know what he's talking about? You do?
No.
You don't know what he's...
I can figure it out.
No, it's not about figuring out. Do you know or not? If not, we need to ask him so we can do that, okay? This is not a guessing game. We go by what he tells us.
Yeah, I know.
So I took pictures of...
Here's my map. Did you hear him? I didn't even try to find it.
I did. This is what I've been saying.
So, you see this picture here? This is wet area system.
Let me see. we'll trace it
Okay,
out. We know the building will. I don't have my glasses on yet.
Get on your face.
I tell you what, it's crazy.
He's reading glasses.
Okay. Listen to me. Let's see.
This wet area here, just
Tell me
north
what-
of the courtyard. Wet area number 1.
Let's see.
This wet area here, just
Tell me
north
what-
of the courtyard. Wet area number 1.
There is another portion. But you heard the statements, we haven't tried. When did those break? February 21st. We haven't tried to fix them. We've been waiting on insurance money. They have money sitting there. Bringing people into the building, knowing that the sprinklers do not work. Again, what was the response to the probation, the adjustment to their accreditation status, the opportunity that was given to the school district in April? Fix all of these issues. We didn't even know about the sprinklers at that time. Couldn't have, right? Didn't happen until after that. And it did not happen, at least the violation didn't happen until after probation. Things are getting worse. There's no better evidence than, the response was, we won't fix the sprinkler system, we're going to spend time and resources, taxpayer money, to file a lawsuit.
Brad, would you articulate the lawsuit?
Sure.
Who have they sued?
They have sued you, the State Board of Education and the State Department of Education. One asserting that you do not have the authority to essentially want to talk to them in an open meeting, to have them appear and talk to them. That's one assertion. We have filed a motion to dismiss. Their response is due in just a few days, and then there's a hearing set. And so, again, resources were used in those areas. That was the response. No attempts to repair the culture, course correct. I haven't seen efforts to retain staff. I've seen the outcome of that. I've not seen a heightened focus on student learning loss, addressing those things. We've now seen disregard for safety and care of others. And then June 14th, this is going so well, we're going to just double down, affirm our commitment to the superintendent and keep going. That has been the response. Back up. Pay attention to what happens here. These are just clips throughout just a basic search over the last 2 years in Western Heights. Starting with the hiring. We talked about July of 2019. Parents frustrated. Western Heights, not everyone gets food. Superintendent's critics confront the school board. Please help us. Western Heights closes schools after a heated school board meeting with teachers and staff. Western Heights battles Oklahoma State School Board. Western Heights teacher explains why she was leaving after 24 years. Was her parents engaged at a school board meeting? Western Heights asking the superintendent, school board members to resign. School district faces criticism after ceasing providing meals to their students in the midst of a pandemic, and over 90% of those students are dealing with food insecurity. 15 employees resigned. If we had the June 14th headline, that would have been 21. Board members spotted drinking during the public meeting. That's just a quick glance.
And I do have an answer from Ryan Piper, 167 instructional days for Western Heights on their superintendent certified annual statistical report.
Okay.
And that's for this year.
Okay.
167.
So board
And he has
members-
100, and he has 100 days off.
That's right, that's right. Hey,
Brad, you may be getting to this, but what about like any civil rights violations, like for special needs?
we do. I would, it's fair to say, there is a systematic oppression of parent and student rights in Western Heights under the current leadership. Alternative education, special education, communication, fundamental rights.
That aren't being met.
Correct. And so the last slide with the media clips, the continuing cries for assistance and help to correct what's going on under the current leadership has to be turned around, has to be stopped. And thankfully, as your vote earlier, that will begin right away. And it should continue. And that's where we are right now. So recommend next steps. Again, the district had the opportunity, formal notice and opportunity to make corrective action beginning in April for 90 days. That lapses July 8th. It's into that 90-day period. It's coming up.
And just to clarify, I think you've shown the answer, but they've taken no steps to rectify any of the issues since that time that you've seen.
Substantial
I think that's
steps that would be meaningful course correction, the evidence is lacking.
I'll just use an example. 2 years ago, federal programs found them non-compliant. One of the reasons was not having a policy on serving homeless students, enrolling and serving those students. They have a policy now. They provided evidence of that policy in the materials sent last night. We still have complaints from schools in the metro area that serve only homeless students about their interactions with that school district. You might take a step to develop a policy and have that policy in place, but the substantial steps that need to be taken to turn the entire ship, the entire organization around has not happened. And I think the department would say, we would ask you to have no confidence that that is going to happen unless things get more serious. And so that's where we are right now.
So there is still an opportunity for the Western Heights School Board to acknowledge what this board has done, to suspend the superintendent certification for Mannix Barnes. But they're still paying him, and he is still in that position. He cannot serve as superintendent if he is with a suspended certificate. We need to see the board take action to follow the steps of this board to demonstrate that they're serious about their accreditation status and about serving the needs of the community and the students within their district. So there are steps they can take, but we're prepared if they're not. And we're prepared to stabilize and support that school district so that children can be served, the community can remain engaged and be a part of actually what is required with the use of these federal dollars that we've talked about. There has to be a plan, and there are requirements for for community input to be part of developing a plan on how those dollars are to be spent. We don't see evidence, in fact, the contrary, that kind of meaningful input is well received. But there's still time.
action item for today. Possible action, and what would that action be? Before I get there, I think it's just noteworthy, at the very least, we have parents of the community showing up today to give comments to you, and the district refused to talk to you, didn't really want to talk to you March, April, ongoing. And we don't have a supporter of the current leadership showing up, asking to have conversations with you. Instead, we have community engagement, asking, pleading for help from the department in this body. It's telling. So what is the recommendation at this point? This would be a recommended motion to provide some notice, additional notice of this additional opportunity to the school district. I won't read it line by line unless.
I think it would be fine to go ahead and read that, and for those who cannot read it.
So number one, we would ask the board to note formally that a school superintendent serves as the CEO, the chief executive officer of a local school board, and is responsible for demonstrating and maintaining professional competencies that are required for certification and maintain that certification from the State Board of Education, and for providing leadership in all facets of administration of that school district. That's number one. Number two would be based on the matters that have been presented and acted on today, leading up to today, to immediately suspend Mr. Barnes and his certificate, and then implement procedures to revoke the certification of Mannix Barnes. The School District Board of Education shall immediately suspend Mannix Barnes from his employment with the school district. Should the Western Heights Board of Education not take immediate action on the conditions of probation and consistent with the actions of the State Board today, the State Board said, the State Board is ready, we're able, we're willing to intervene and provide confidence, security, stability, competence, and continuity of the school district for the students, families, and the school district community. With those three in mind, recommend, as noticed on the agenda today, and the authority that's set forth, that you move to have the State Department of Education notify Western Heights School District that on July 12th, the next scheduled meeting of the State Board, and after that July 8th lapse, that the State Board may consider modifying those conditions of probation. Those modifications and those conditions may include state intervention, possible loss of accreditation, and annexation that would result from that should the local school board at Western Heights not implement immediate corrective actions consistent with the State Board of Education's actions on Western Heights from and since March 25th, 2021.
I have one small, on one, this is minor, but I don't think that the school superintendent serves as the CEO of the board. He serves as the CEO of the district, right?
Mm-hmm. It's in statute.
But it's the CEO of the board.
It's interesting.
Essentially to represent the.
I doubt that most school boards feel that way about the superintendent, but okay.
Sounds like the school board might.
I move to have the Oklahoma State Department of Education notify Western Heights Board of Education on today, July 12, 2021. The State Board of Education may consider modifying the conditions of probation to include state intervention and/or possible loss of accreditation and annexation should the school board not implement immediate corrective actions consistent with the State Board of Education's actions today regarding Western Heights from and since March 25th, 2021.
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a proper motion and a second. Would there be any other comments that you have or any questions?
I do want to make a comment. I made one a couple of months ago on one of our Zoom calls that we have heard the cries of the folks from the district, and we are responding, and we do care for the kids and the families there, and we're prepared to do what we need to protect them and help them.
Thank you.
I just like.
And I want to also add the fact is that we take this action, not pleasant, we take this action for the purpose of providing safety for the student body and the employees of the district.
I would just like to add, I don't think anybody on this board takes putting school districts on probation, suspending or revoking a school superintendent's license. I think we've seen very clearly today that the school board and the leadership at the district don't seem interested in responding to the concerns that we've had for months at this board, and therefore it rises to the level that we have to intervene.
This is about kids. This is about the community. This is also about those teachers and support staff and bus drivers and cafeteria workers and all of those people who come together to be there for kids and provide that school environment for learning. And we know that the community wants their school and all of the schools in the district to rise and to rebound. And we want to be a part of seeing that happen. The current school district can do that. There can be an absolute change. A 180 is going to be required, but we're prepared to act if that doesn't happen in the timeline given.
And frankly, we've seen other school districts who have acted after being put on notice by this board.
And we haven't seen that here. In fact, the response was to sue. The response was to show little respect, no regard for the authority of this board or the regulation that comes with the responsibility through the State Department of Education. And that's going to change. It has to change. We will keep our focus on students and protecting their rights, their civil rights, and also their right to have a strong, well-rounded education with great people who want to be a part of leading that community and these kids.
I would just echo, especially, Brian, your original comments about the parents and their voices and continuing to be a voice for coming, for traveling, for reaching out, from the teachers, hearing from students. Just the level of advocacy and engagement is critical for us to be able to transform systems to serve children in the most meaningful ways. So thank you.
All right, with that, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobek.
Aye.
Ms. Moniz.
Aye.
Superintendent Hoffmeister.
Aye. All right, that motion carries. We have one more action item related to Western Heights, and that is item number 12D. Discussion and possible action, request a special investigative audit of Western Heights Independent School District for the fiscal years 2019-20 to the current time, and any other years deemed necessary for compliance with statutes, rules, policies, and internal control procedures, or other items applicable to Western Heights Independent School District.
Superintendent, board members did not have a PowerPoint, no slides for this item. I think it's very straightforward, given what has been presented last hour or so. And before that, the state board has the authority to request a special audit from Title 74, Section 213. And the state auditor would then begin that special investigative audit for the reasons identified on the agenda and what has been presented, considered, acted on today.
Brad, if I'm not mistaken, the community had already taken a petition to start one, so this would just expand that. Is that correct?
Potentially.
Yeah.
That's a great point. The citizens of the community, remember the slide with the electors and the votes. Not only did the electors in the community show up in that 2021 election, but they also engaged in a petition where at least 10% of the electors in the community put their name and identify the reasons, and then submit that to the state auditor. The state auditor will then begin an audit for the reasons identified in that audit. They can supplement, and this one could also expand on that.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ms. Williams-Bradley.
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan.
Aye.
Mr. Bobec.
Aye.
Ms. Mundy.
Aye.
Superintendent Thomas.
Aye. All right, that motion carries as well. Thank you, board. Now, I would ask if there is a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, and that was unanimous. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.